The title, family, and talent came easily, but their value was revealed too late. The loss became the price for someone else's will, and the heart accepted this bitter order. The mistake lingers in our wake, reminding us how costly it is to stray from our previous path. Now, determination burns within, and the hand is ready to strike without hesitation. He crushes her with a cold grin, devaluing the past and the power she once carried. The words hit home, mocking weakness and uselessness, as if erasing the old name. The blow to the hand intensifies the humiliation, but inside a fierce, unquenchable determination rises. Siren walks beside him, and he gently guides her, promising a crown and the rise of the family. He convinces Siren that the throne is the highest honor where even a brother in heaven would be proud. The same man now presses with a grin, reproaching Siren for the lack of an heir. He leans towards Siren, harshly reminding her of her fall and ruined reputation. Siren remains burdened with charges related to shame and illicit relations. Siren faces accusations of witchcraft and embezzlement, and the crowd pressures her, denying her the right to the truth. Serena falls into despair, begging for faith, but her words are drowned in the cold of someone else's hostility. Siren breaks down, throwing out accusations, revealing someone else's guilt and ruined life. He takes the blow with a sneer, reminding them how he appropriated power and its legacy. Siren exposes the truth, where her rise became a trap and a cover for the crimes of others. He intercepts Siren's words, rudely returning the accusation and erasing her attempt at justification. The pause stretches heavily, and his gaze coldly assesses her broken state. The man leans closer, sarcastically acknowledging her cleverness with obvious mockery. He openly states that he used Siren, getting everything he wanted from her. He presses further, twisting the truth, trying to force Siren to accept the imposed guilt. He remembers how Siren lived under protection, following orders, and enjoying the luxury of the throne. Siren is lost, clinging to the past, where her whole life seemed right and whole. Siren looks up, and an understanding of the deception hidden behind the glitter is born in him. Siren shatters the illusion, realizing that everything beautiful turned out to be a lie and a trap. He cuts her off coldly, asserting that useless things are discarded without regret. The man coldly covers up cruelty with words of order, confidently maintaining control of the situation. The man calls the guards and leaves, leaving Siren broken on the cold stone. Serena admits how she trusted a man, allowing him to ruin her life. Serena recalls how a man promised protection and power, hiding behind it a deception. Siren shivered on the cold stone under the blue light of the tower, holding back tears after the cruel betrayal of those close to her. Siren looked up sharply from beneath her tangled white hair as the stranger's heavy footsteps appeared in the silent hallway. A tall mage in a dark robe stopped by the wall, hiding his face under a patterned hood amid the shimmering dust. Serena struggled to her knees before the wizard, her fingers clinging to the icy floor as she pleaded. Siren grabbed the edge of the mage's robe and spoke desperately of magic that could restore lost youth. The mage in the embroidered robe calmly explained to Siren the price of the forbidden ritual as the cold moonlight fell on the tower walls. Serena, in tears, clutched the hem of his clothes and desperately prayed for the past to return, forgetting the pain and fear of death. The mage's heavy words hit Siren like an icy wave, and the scarlet glow around made the night darker and quieter. Golden circles of magic flared above the wizard, while the ancient clock flickered with light in the endless darkness. The mage slowly turned away from Serene, and her trembling hand reached out to follow him under the cold glow of sparks. Serena struggled to stay on the cold floor as blood trickled down her fingers, and her thoughts were drowned in the fear of imminent death. A white flower slowly swirled among the scarlet spots, reminding Siren of unfulfilled dreams and lost time. Ezra appeared in Serene's memory among the golden flowers, calm and warm, like the last ray of light in her life. The quiet image of the young man dissolved in the radiance of white petals, while his touch retained the remnants of tenderness and love. Serena sat up abruptly in bed in the sunlit room, clutching the bedspread tightly with trembling fingers from excitement. The golden light glided over the old furniture and Siren's long hair as hope slowly returned to her heart. The maids quietly discussed Siren in the middle of the marble hall, worried about her tears and sleepless nights before the holiday. The young maid anxiously pressed her hand to her chest as the conversation about Siren's upcoming 20th birthday filled the room with heaviness. The family portrait glowed in the soft light, reminding Siren of her duty to the house and the family's young heir. The quiet conversation of the maids echoed throughout the mansion as the fate of the Earl's legacy slowly became more and more alarming. Anna carefully opened the door to Siren's bedroom, standing in surprise in the warm light of early morning. Siren stood at the window, with long golden hair, pulling back the heavy curtains to let in the sunlight. Siren's soft smile filled the room with golden light, and the delicate roses highlighted her calm and beauty. Serena appeared in a strict dark dress, with blue ribbons attracting glances, with her cold confidence and grace. Serena met Anna's anxious gaze calmly, maintaining a stern posture in the warm light of the spacious room. Serena coldly reminded her of her duty to her family, while a confused Anna listened silently to the funeral instructions. The vast hall was bathed in the golden glow of the fireplace, while Seren sat alone at the long dining table. The elderly butler stood tensely before Serena, speaking cautiously about the condition of young Ezra after the tragedy. The servants watched the calm Serena, with surprise, not understanding the change after the recent quarrel with the carriage and Ezra. The butler anxiously informed Serene about Ezra's imprisonment, while a heavy silence slowly filled the vast hall. Serena held the utensils calmly in her slender fingers, thinking about the pain of young Ezra in the golden light of the fireplace. Bloody memories of her past life flashed before Siren, reminding her of Ezra's early death and cruel fate. Siren lowered her eyes in the gloomy silence, determined not to let Ezra die again in this time. The butler listened in surprise to the confident Siren, while her calm voice filled the hall with adult determination. The butler frowned anxiously at the sunny window, hearing Sirene's order to stay away from Saran Hunter. Sirene crossed her arms coldly at the long table, answering the butler with the caustic confidence of a grown woman of the house. Serena's gaze grew heavier as memories of her secret affair with Sir Hunter surfaced in her mind. The young maids looked at each other in fear in the middle of the luxurious hall, while the butler confusedly justified his decision. Sirene slammed her palm down on the table, and her rage swept through the spacious room of the mansion like a whirlwind. Serena suddenly fell silent in the middle of the luxurious hall, while the butler looked at her outburst in confusion. Dark memories washed over Serene in the empty room where she had once mourned the death of her parents, all alone. The butler bowed low before Serena at the long table, acknowledging his mistake in the warm light of the mansion. Serena clenched her fingers tightly, remembering the greedy guardian who dreamed of taking possession of the Count's family's wealth. Serena looked thoughtfully at the old map, calculating Saran Hunter's route through the cold mountain roads. Siren stood firmly before the butler, causing the vast hall to freeze under the weight of her new orders. Golden light reflected off the marble floor as Siren quickly made her way towards the estate's exit. The image of Saran Hunter flashed in Sirene's memory, like a dark threat over the ancient castle of the Count's family. Serena pressed her palm to her chest, resolutely, announcing her trip to the knightly order to save her family. Serena strode confidently through the hunter's luxurious residence, while the anxious maid barely kept up with her. Siren's warm smile blossomed among the golden roses, and her shining gaze was filled with vibrant energy and lightness. The butler bowed respectfully before Serena as she thoughtfully recalled habits from her distant past. Serena rode joyfully through the sunny wind, enjoying the freedom after long years of palace life. Serena paused beside the white horse in the soft morning light, remembering long ago rides along green roads. Serena gently held the reins of the white horse calmly, warning the servants of the slow and long journey to the order. The white horse took off across the sunlit courtyard as Sirene confidently rode towards her destiny. The fire dragon roared among the ancient legends of Tainut, illuminating with flame the lands of the great knights of the past. The 5 knights raised their shining swords against the monster, defending the kingdom under flashes of magical light. The golden sword soared into the starry sky, marking the beginning of a new era and the birth of royal power. 4 great knights raised a golden shield under the blaze of swords, vowing to protect the kingdom until the end of their lives. The ranks of the knights stood motionless under the scarlet banners of Tainut, guarding the borders of the state and the ancient order. The young knights lined up under the royal coat of arms, preparing to dedicate long years of service to Laha Oru Henosia. Serena rode swiftly through the forest roads, remembering the difficult years of service in the knightly order. The white horse reared up sharply in the bright wind, while Siren firmly decided not to retreat any further. Siren slowed her horse in the cool forest, looking anxiously at the familiar towers of the knightly order. Sunlight flooded the order's fortress, as Serena gratefully recalled the years that had given her a new purpose. At the gates of the Sirenu order, a girl in a knight's uniform suddenly called out to her, freezing in surprise at the meeting. Moana Kulin smiled joyfully among the floral glow, learning of Siren's return to the order's walls. Moana squeezed Siren's hands warmly at the stone gate, worried about her condition after the family tragedy. Siren looked at Moana with confusion, remembering her devotion after the death of her parents and the difficult days of grief. Moana left the mansion silently after Siren's refusal, as the chill of loneliness filled the vast house. The gloomy courtroom fell into an icy silence as the condemned Siren was brought out again before the crowd of nobles. A pale Siren stood before the court with a dull gaze as cruel accusations were heard from all sides. Moana leapt to her feet in the darkened courtroom, desperately defending Siren's honor before the angry crowd. Moana was held captive by guards in the icy courtroom as the crowd showered Siren with vicious accusations and shouts. Siren raised her dull gaze to the noisy crowd, amazed at the blind hatred of the people around the royal court. A tear slowly rolled down Siren's cheek as her desperate belief in justice began to crumble completely. Sirena huddled on the cold floor of her prison cell, remembering the punishment she had suffered for speaking out against the cruel court. Siren looked at Moana with sad tenderness at the order's gates, grateful for her loyalty in the past. Moana smiled warmly at Siren at the order's gates, not allowing sadness to ruin their long-standing friendship and trust. Sakharin walked beside Moana through the bright courtyard of the order, hiding the true purpose of her unexpected trip. Moana laughed sheepishly in the sunlight, awkwardly apologizing for the late news of Siren's return. Siren looked up at Moana with a confused expression, gradually realizing how much work her friend had been taking on before. Moana worked confidently with documents in the order's quiet office, helping Siren discreetly resolve important matters. Siren looked down guiltily in the soft sunlight, realizing how blindly she had rejected Moana's help before. Commander Ash Greywind quietly studied documents in his decorated office, reflecting on the tragedy of the Hunter family. Dennis Balzac spoke indifferently of the youngest Hunter heir as the warm light glided across the order hall. The name of young Ezra Hunter rang out among the shining vaults of the order, reminding of the upcoming entrance test. Ezra held his training sword tightly against the walls of the order, trying to prove his right to become a knight. Dennis Balzac looked at Ezra's documents with a mocking smile, comparing the young heir to the talented Sirena. The knights of the order chatted quietly among the stone arches, recalling Siren's outstanding performance in the exams. The image of the young Siren flared among golden roses and magical sparks, striking the order with rare strength and talent. The tall knight rose abruptly from his seat in the heavy silence of the office, interrupting the conversation about Siren's abilities. The commander's cold gaze stopped the noisy argument, reminding the knights that talent alone was not enough for greatness. The commander of the order stood calmly among the golden light of the stained glass windows, speaking about the power of human desire and will. The knight's cold gaze slid through the shining patterns as the conversation about Siren's origins grew heavier. Sirena listened silently next to Moana among the delicate roses, hiding her irritation behind a calm expression. The commander looked away with restraint, clearly showing his disdain for the Hunter family's origins and glory. The spacious office fell into an awkward silence as the knights finally refused Siren's support for the order. Siren looked down gloomily after the order's refusal, while Moana anxiously tried to support her in the silence of the corridor. Moana carefully held the doors of the order, confusedly questioning Siren about the unexpected appearance of her guardian. Siren stood tensely at the massive doors, hearing a familiar greeting from the knights of the order behind her. The commander and vice commander walked calmly through the bright hall of the order until Moana turned to meet them in surprise. Moana bowed respectfully before the senior knights, while Siren watched the unexpected meeting warily. Sirena bowed awkwardly before the vice commander, while the knight watched her with mild interest. The tall commander stood silently over Siren in the shining hall of the order, his gaze cold and calm. Sirena tried to address the commander in confusion, her voice faltering under the weight of old memories and anxiety. Moana and the knights stood stunned around Siren, taken aback by her sudden confusion in the tense silence. Moana cheerfully grabbed Siren by the shoulders, trying to hide her awkwardness with jokes about being overtired and having endless worries. Moana quickly disappeared into the bright courtyard of the order, leaving behind the sound of footsteps and ringing laughter among the arches. The vice commander glanced at the silent commander with a slight grin, suspecting the reason for Serena's sudden escape. The order's commander frowned in the golden light of the corridor, hiding his irritation behind a cold, heavy gaze. Moana threw up her hands indignantly at the marble fountain, accusing Sirene of a rude and strange greeting. Moana clutched her head in panic amidst the pink glow, admitting that she had expected Siren to be expelled from the Order. Siren looked away awkwardly under the cool sky of the Order, trying to hide her embarrassment and confused thoughts about the commander. A heavy silence hung between Serena and Ash Greywind as the unpleasant memory burned deeper than ever. Moana leaned towards Siren curiously in the soft light of the courtyard, quickly guessing the reason for her confusion. Ash Greywind's image flared in the golden light of the Order's legends, glorifying the young swordmaster and hero of the kingdom. The girls watched Ash in admiration among the stone walls of the Order, discussing his beauty glory and impeccable reputation. Moana raised a finger indignantly amidst the pink glow, not understanding how Siren could be irritated by the great commander of the Order. Serena made some confused excuses under the cool sky of the courtyard, trying to hide her old irritation and embarrassment. Siren glanced back at Ash Greywind's figure with concern, as doubts about the past slowly filled her thoughts. Serena thoughtfully pressed her fingers to her lips, remembering the peaceful days of service in the Order, without hatred and enmity. Ash's dark image flashed in Serene's memory, like a dark radiance causing a strange anxiety and inner chill. Siren crossed her arms angrily against the backdrop of stars, irritated as she recalled the cold silence of the Order commander. Moana watched Siren thoughtfully in the Order's courtyard, noticing the strange changes after the death of her parents. Serena pressed her hand to her chest warily as the conversation turned again to her uncle and guardianship rights. A shadow of worry crossed Siren's face among the fallen leaves as Moana asked cautiously about Uncle Hunter. Siren slowly looked up into the golden glow of the courtyard, about to reveal to Moana the hidden truth of the past. Serena looked sadly towards the winter courtyard, hiding the impossible truth about returning from the distant future. In the cold glow of the palace, Siren became queen next to her greedy uncle, who had carried out a long-standing calculating plan. A fair-haired prince with a frightening smile appeared among Serene's dark memories of false accusations at court. The bloody dagger trembled in the killer's hands, as Siren's life faded away amidst the betrayal and cruel pain of the past. Serena lowered her tired gaze, realizing that there was only a year left until she reached adulthood, and there was almost no time left. Moana laughed carelessly, assuring Siren that her uncle would surely be happy to see his niece in the capital. An image of Ariana appeared before Siren's eyes, a beautiful cousin with a luxurious dress and an overly gentle smile. Ariana once seemed like just a cheerful girl, constantly dreaming of the capital's life and social outfits. The young cousin twirled around happily in her new dress, completely oblivious to the hidden tension in Serena's gaze. Serena watched Ariana, silently remembering how dangerous desires and envy hid behind that carefree smile. Ariana uttered the terrible words with a quiet smile, that one day everything belonging to Siren would become her property. But now, after returning from the future, every word Ariana said sounded completely different, like a frank admission of her true intentions. Moana decided that Siren had fallen into a dark place again after her parents' death, and she gently tried to cheer her up. But Siren unexpectedly declared that she intended to become not just a knight, but a chevalier, the holder of the highest knightly title. Chevaliers were considered the pinnacle of knightly skill. Only masters of the sword and heroes who had accomplished great feats received such a title. Despite their great honor and influence, the chevalier received relatively little remuneration, so most nobles limited themselves to ordinary service in the order. Serena knew full well how difficult it was to achieve such a title, but that was precisely why she decided to take this path, to gain the strength and independence that she so lacked in her past life. Siren's memory flashed back to her uncle, the man who had spent his entire life hiding his ambitions behind words of care and protection. Only after the death of her parents did Siren reveal the true identity of the uncle who held power over her name and inheritance. Now she decided to completely abandon her former weakness and never again rely on someone else's protection. Squeezing the hilt of her sword, Siren cast aside her weakness and decided to become a knight that no one could break. Serena quickly entered the mansion, and the maid Anna bowed respectfully at the carved doors. Siren's golden locks shook at the sharp question as her violet eyes swept the room. In the luxurious hall, servants were rushing about with pillows and chests, preparing the rooms for the important arrival. Butler Ben leisurely explained to Siren that the mansion was being prepared for Lord Hunter's arrival. The light from the chandeliers flickered across Siren's face as the mention of a guest room made her tense. Serena coldly stopped the butler, Godwin reminding him who was now in charge of this mansion. Under the glow of the chandeliers, Siren raised her hand sharply, her voice sounding harsh and confident. Godwin's face turned pale, and his intense gaze flickered after the words of the young mistress of the house. The maids bowed fearfully next to the butler, as Siren demanded that her decisions be respected. As she passed by, Serena reminded Godwin that this was the second time he had made a similar mistake. As she climbed the wide staircase, Siren gave the maid a cold warning not to anger her again. Godwin quickly ordered the servants to return the furniture and curtains to their places while the hall was in a state of commotion. The butler ordered a separate wing to be prepared for Lord Hunter, and the maids immediately ran away. In the silence of the library, Siren bent over a book, sorting through papers in the soft light of the lamps. Godwin froze in confusion when Serena calmly asked how much money would be spent on his parents' funeral. In the spacious library, Siren ordered Godwin to immediately begin preparations for the funeral of the Count and Countess. With her head bowed over the table, Serena looked heavily at the papers, remembering the cold bodies of her parents. Godwin pointed to the lines in the ledger, and Siren frowned at the modest amounts. Before Siren's eyes flashed the palace, where ministers and royal advisors always made decisions for her. Leafing through the thick books, Serena realized with annoyance that she would now have to study finance herself. Behind the shadows of Siren's servants and advisors, she no longer saw loyalty, but only hidden calculations and greed. Godwin thoughtfully sorted through the papers, calculating how much money could still be collected for the estate. The butler's finger stopped on the line of expenses, where the huge payments to Siren's uncle were listed. Serena leaned sharply towards the book, astonished by the sums that went into supporting the mourning family. Among the gold coins, the image of a greedy uncle and his daughter, who had lived for years at the expense of the Count's house, emerged. Gold coins scattered across the pages of books as Siren calculated the mourning family's enormous expenses. Behind Siren, a dark image of Laura Hunter emerged, ready to take power over the county into her own hands. Serena firmly clenched her fingers to her chin, realizing that the greedy uncle would not give up the money voluntarily. Godwin anxiously adjusted his gloves, anticipating a major scandal following the cut in payments to the mourning family. Among the bookshelves, Siren calmly closed the ledger, leaving the remaining funds to the county. The Count's heavy seal gleamed on the table as Serena prepared the papers to withdraw money from the account. Godwin leaned over the table in confusion, and Serena coldly decided to give her parents a decent funeral. Serena's memory flashed to her greedy uncle, who had been secretly pocketing the Hunter family's dowry for years. Serena looked up with a shining gaze and decided to spend every coin on a farewell service for her parents. In the courtyard, servants were hurriedly carrying boxes and things. Ariana watched the chests with a beaming smile, dreaming of moving to the luxurious capital as soon as possible. Heavy suitcases were piled up in the courtyard, and servants were constantly dragging boxes to a huge cart. Upon hearing about the move to the capital, Ariana flushed with joy and was already sharing rooms in the Count's estate. The father smiled indulgently at his daughter, allowing her to make capricious plans for a new rich life. In the darkness, his satisfied grin became colder because he had long considered the Hunter's mansion his own. Serena leafed through the books until late at night, finding her uncle's name in almost every report on the family's expenses. The lines in the accounting books were all jumbled up before her eyes because she had never been taught such things before. Amidst the disturbing thoughts, the kind face of Moana, able to sort out the confusing notes, surfaced. Tired Serena slammed the heavy book shut and decided to put off the calculations until the next evening. At dawn, Ash heard with cold displeasure that Siren was already looking for a horse to train. Dennis pulled Ash along with him with a wide grin, looking forward to seeing Siren's early training. In the bright morning light, Dennis teased the commander playfully, waiting for his violent reaction. Ash replied dryly and calmly, but Dennis only laughed louder at his gloomy look. Siren looked at the men in confusion, surprised by Dennis's overly abrupt behavior around Ash. Dennis's sly smile grew quieter, as Siren's rudeness from yesterday still occupied his thoughts. Dennis opened the doors to the training room with an excited grin, expecting to see a real show. Ash followed silently in, while Dennis continued to whet their curiosity with loud taunts. Ash's calm gaze remained cold, but a faint interest in what was happening flickered in his eyes. In the center of the hall, Siren quickly raised her sword, cutting through the air with a confident and heavy blow. Golden hair billowed behind Siren as the blade whistled through the air. Hearing Ash's voice, Siren turned around sharply, her purple eyes flashing with worried irritation. The blade froze at Ash's chest as Siren looked up at the commander with a burning face. Ash remained still and calm, towering over Siren, with his usual cold expression. Cyrena frowned in displeasure and looked away with difficulty, hiding her awkwardness after the sharp attack. Dennis could barely contain his laughter as he watched Siren become lost again next to the imperturbable Ash. After an awkward silence, Siren greeted Ash with a restrained expression, trying to hide the irritation on her face. Siren then quickly bowed to Dennis, while Ash watched her fuss from the sidelines with indifference. Dennis smiled softly and recalled with mild interest little Serena from her time as a page. Hearing these words, Siren stood frozen in confusion amidst the sunlight and the ringing of training swords. Knights and servants gathered around, looking at Siren with curiosity after her long return. Ash calmly asked about the upcoming exam, and Siren looked up at him with surprised purple eyes. Swords clanged in the training arena as Dennis cheerfully explained the rules for advancing in knight rank. Siren pressed her hand to her lips thoughtfully, imagining her new status and place among the elite knights. Dennis laughed joyfully and immediately reminded that a high rank brings a much higher salary. Hearing about the money, Serena immediately perked up, causing Dennis to be genuinely surprised and laugh. Ash frowned as he heard talk of the Hunter family's financial problems and the county's dwindling coffers. Behind the knights' backs, alarming rumors were whispered about Uncle Aries' debts and secret financial machinations. Serena looked down, finally connecting the disappearance of huge sums of money with her own uncle's greed. A self-satisfied uncle, bathing in gold and luxury at the expense of the Hunter family, appeared before my eyes. Serena was determined to cut off her uncle's access to the money and save the inheritance for the sake of little Ezra. Serena calmly asked about the Chevalier's salary, trying to hide her concern about the family debts. The commander stopped at the exit and told Siren to come see him after training. The cold voice sounded harsh as the knights around continued to make noise and talk. Serena nodded silently, holding back her tension and trying not to show her confusion to the commander. In the evening, the girl cautiously entered the office, where the scarlet sunset filled the room with warm light. At the door of Siren's office, she stood frozen next to Captain Ash, not understanding why he had met her in person. In the warm light of the library, Ash calmly allowed entry, and Siren nervously pressed her hand to her chest. The girl frowned and looked coldly at Captain Ash, suspecting another mockery on his part. The captain lazily crossed his arms at the door and cast a calm, slightly irritated glance at Siren. A heavy silence hung between them as Siren tried to understand Captain Ash's strange behavior. Captain Ash calmly asked about the promotion exam, while Siren stood warily at the office door. Serena briefly confirmed her decision, turning sharply to face the captain with a stubborn glint in her eyes. Ash coldly reminded them of palace etiquette, ordering them to keep the door open for the sake of propriety. Under the golden light of the office, Captain Ash handed Siren an application for admission to the exam. Serena carefully examined the papers and quietly thanked Ash, surprised by such unexpected help. Serena filled out the application form with concentration at the wide table, while Captain Ash watched her closely. The girl looked up from the papers, her fingers tightening on the pen after Ash's unexpected address. The captain's quiet question about fear of men or the sword cut through the heavy silence of the office. Siren suddenly turned pale and froze in shock, realizing that Ash had guessed about her hidden feelings. Captain Ash stared at Siren, asking the dangerous question about fear of men and swords. Siren's trembling hand slowly wrote out the lines, while disturbing thoughts tangled one after another. The girl quickly conveyed the statement to Ash, trying to hide her confusion behind a calm expression. Captain Ash looked through the papers thoughtfully and indifferently began to explain the pay levels for the divisions. A thin pen glided across the sheet of paper as Ash calmly compared the incomes of the knights of different squads. Siren breathed a sigh of relief and focused on calculating the salaries for each division. Hearing the amount for the Chevalier, the girl covered her mouth with her hand and froze from severe shock. Captain Ash watched silently as Siren compared her new income with her previous salary in amazement. Golden light from the high windows fell softly on Siren as the conversation turned to the Hunter family's finances. Siren frowned sharply and met Ash's gaze coldly, clearly not wanting to discuss family issues. Captain Ash coughed awkwardly and looked away, realizing that the conversation had gone too far for Siren. Serena rose abruptly from the table and headed for the exit, wanting to end this conversation quickly. The warm light of the library flickered as Ash suddenly asked about her fear of the training sword. The girl turned around in surprise and answered briefly, squeezing her fingers tighter from the growing tension. Ash stepped closer and quietly revealed the truth, causing Siren to freeze from the painful memories. Serena stood frozen in the middle of the office, trying to hide her anxiety under a tense and cold expression on her face. Captain Ash calmly turned and headed for the exit, leaving the girl in the heavy silence of the library. Already at the door, Ash suddenly stopped and threw Siren a short piece of advice as a parting word. The captain's tall figure stood out in the golden light of the office, while his voice sounded even and hard. Ash calmly explained that a knight must not fear the sword, otherwise the path of the chevalier would be unattainable. Siren nervously adjusted her hair and hastily tried to hide her confusion in front of Captain Ash. The girl quickly bowed and hurried towards the exit, avoiding meeting Ash's gaze. In the empty corridor, Siren clenched her fists in irritation, remembering the difficult conversation in the captain's office. Ash thoughtfully touched his neck and followed the girl with a calm but attentive gaze. Cold thoughts slowly swirled through Ash's head as he pondered Siren's strange hatred. In the courtyard of the estate, a maid hurriedly informed Siren about the imminent arrival of her uncle and his companions. Siren sharply raised her head and tensely pulled her hair back immediately, demanding to know where they were now. Godwin threw a dark cloak over Serena's shoulders and quietly announced that his uncle had already reached the capital. Serena clutched the cloth tighter around her chest and coldly ordered the servants to begin preparing for the meeting immediately. Serene appeared in the spacious hall in a long black dress, hiding her anxiety behind a calm posture. Approaching the door of Ezra's room, Siren gently warned the boy of their uncle's imminent arrival. At the thought of meeting her greedy relative, Sirene's face trembled and her heart was gripped by a heavy fear. Serena, wrapping herself in a heavy dress, quietly told Ezra not to leave the room and to rest peacefully. The long black hem slid across the marble as Serena walked quickly to greet the guests. The Lord appeared on the threshold of the mansion, his lips stretched into a false smile at the sight of the heiress. The Lord pulled Siren sharply to his chest, pretending to be a caring relative in front of the servants and attendants. Serena pressed her palms against her uncle's shoulders, and irritation flashed in his eyes at her cold reaction. Siren greeted the Lord at the gate with a gentle smile, hiding her anxiety behind calm and polite words. The Lord was about to play the role of a caring guardian, but Siren coldly cut him off mid-sentence. In front of the stunned servants, Siren calmly announced that her parents' funeral had already been fully prepared. Confusion flickered across the Lord's face, because instead of tears, he saw a confident heiress in front of him. The Lord forced a satisfied smile and hugged Siren tighter, continuing to play the role of a loving relative. Serena calmly reminded the Lord and Ariana that the funeral ceremony needed to be prepared urgently by the morning. On the noisy street, servants were already hurrying after the priest, while Serena confidently gave orders. Ariana froze in confusion when Serena suddenly asked if she had brought the black mourning dress. The Lord and Ariana exchanged glances, remembering the previous funeral disrupted due to the girl's frivolous behavior. White petals swirled in the cold air, and Siren was determined not to endure such shame any longer. The Lord smiled tensely next to Serena as she calmly insisted on holding the funeral in the morning. A cold sweat appeared on the Lord's face because Serena's mature seriousness destroyed all his expectations. Memories of the capricious Ariana, who dreamed only of theaters and entertainment, flashed before the Lord's eyes. In the sunny room, Ariana carelessly complained about the nightly order, asking her uncle for another whim. The Lord looked at Siren gloomily, realizing that the death of her parents had changed the heiress of the county too quickly. Serena greeted the Lord with a soft smile, hiding behind politeness, a cold calculation, and calm confidence. Under the bright sky, Siren ordered Godwin to escort the guests, while the Lord frowned in displeasure nearby. The servants silently picked up Ariana's heavy suitcases, and the girl stood frozen in confusion in the middle of the courtyard. Ariana ran after the porters in a panic, waving her arms and complaining about the luggage being taken away. The Lord turned sharply after the servants, only now realizing that they had been sent to a completely different mansion. On the marble steps, Siren calmly watched as the Lord and Ariana ran after the servants in confusion. A cold light flickered in Siren's eyes as the determination to change her own destiny forever grew stronger within her. At the training ground, the knights discussed Siren's disappearance in surprise before an important promotion exam. The young swordsmen looked at each other with alarm, assuming that Siren was afraid of the harsh trials of the order. Captain Ash silently recalled Siren's stubborn gaze and her tightly clenched bandaged palms after training in the empty corridor. Siren's footsteps sounded quieter and quieter, and Captain Ash became increasingly suspicious of something. After the training, the knights bowed in unison to Captain Ash and noisily dispersed into the halls of the Order. Amid the golden light, Captain Ash thoughtfully reminded his comrade of the Hunter family's memorial service that evening. Captain Ash calmly adjusted the sword on his shoulder and, without hesitation, decided to personally attend the Siren ceremony. The Hunter mansion glowed with flowers and candles as a priest prepared to conduct a solemn memorial service. The knights silently examined the luxurious decorations, realizing that a huge amount of money had been spent on the ceremony. Captain Ash looked thoughtfully at the mansion, realizing that Siren had skipped training for the memorial service. In the luxurious hall, the Knights of the Order of Lagomali calmly introduced themselves to the servants of the Hunter family before the ceremony. Lord Gale Hunter shook hands nervously with his guests, trying to hide his anxiety in front of the important visitors to the county. Denise Balzac noted with a slight smile that he had not expected to see Captain Ash himself on duty. Captain Ash coldly adjusted his glove, reminding those present of his high position in the knightly order. Lord Gale, with a forced smile, regretted that Adriana had not brought a morning dress, otherwise he would have been able to introduce her to the knights. He politely asked Captain Ash where Lady Hunter, the hostess of today's ceremony, was now. Denise Balzac diplomatically replied that they should first express their condolences to the family before meeting with Serena. Lord Gale bit his finger in irritation, realizing that all the guests' attention was not currently focused on him. At that moment, Serena appeared in a morning dress, holding a light bouquet for the memorial service. Serena, noticing the Knights of Lagomel, was momentarily confused, but quickly pulled herself together and thanked them for coming. Captain Ash and Denise Balzac expressed their sincere condolences to the Hunter family. Dennis noted that the memorial ceremony was superbly organized, but Serena replied that this was the only thing she could do for her parents. Captain Ash calmly said that her parents would surely appreciate such concern. Serena thanked him quietly, hugging the bouquet of white flowers tighter. Captain Ash noticed that his presence was clearly making Siren nervous and watched her silently from the side. At that moment, the girl's name was called, and Siren immediately turned around. Moana, Siren's close friend, entered the hall, having come to the memorial service in a morning dress. Serena was genuinely happy to see her and smiled without strain for the first time in a long time. Moana said that Siren must be very tired from preparing for the ceremony, and she thanked her friend for coming anyway. Siren's smile became softer and warmer around Moana, and Captain Ash was surprised to notice that she still knew how to look genuinely happy. Dennis Balzac suddenly asked if Lady Hunter had refused the promotion test. Serena asked him in confusion what he was talking about, and Dennis explained that he hadn't seen her at the training ground for a long time. Moana immediately intervened in the conversation and indignantly stated that Siren was training incredibly hard, protecting her friend from suspicion. Moana continued to praise Siren, stating that she trains every day, literally, to the point of exhaustion. Captain Ash asked if her training took place on the Hunter Estate's winter parade grounds, and Serena reluctantly confirmed it. Hearing this, Moana became even more indignant and reminded him how cold it was in the open air in winter. She said that even during snowstorms, Serena continued training near the North Wall, where an icy wind constantly blows. Siren sheepishly tried to stop her friend as she vividly described her harsh sword training. Denise Balzac asked if Moana had trained with Lady Colin, but the girl admitted that she had only lasted a few sessions and could no longer stand the cold. Siren laughed awkwardly as Moana continued to complain about the harsh winter training. Soon, Siren was called by other guests of the estate who wanted to express their condolences to the Hunter family. She apologized to the knights and her friend, thanking everyone for coming to the ceremony. Watching Serena leave, Captain Ash thought about how she had really been training all this time, completely alone. Captain Ash left the memorial hall, unexpectedly surprising Dennis Balzac. When asked where he was heading, Ash briefly replied that he was going to the training grounds. Dennis looked at him with bewilderment, not understanding why he needed to leave in the middle of the ceremony. Once outside, Captain Ash looked thoughtfully towards the winter parade grounds of the Hunter estate. Remembering Moana's words about Siren's training, he quietly admitted that everything really was exactly as she described. Upon reaching the winter training ground, Captain Ash immediately realized how harsh the training conditions were. He noted that it was terribly cold here now, and without constant movement, his muscles would literally go numb instantly. Looking around the empty parade ground, Ash couldn't believe that Siren trained every day in such a place all alone. At that moment, he heard familiar voices and hid behind a column, unwittingly becoming a witness to someone else's conversation. The Lord informed Siren that he had decided to expel her and Adriana from the Hunter household. Lord Gale coldly addressed Siren as the current head of the Hunter family and declared his decision without hesitation. Hearing this, Siren asked again, in shock, not believing that he was actually going to kick them out of the estate. Lord Gale stated that the house was currently in mourning, and the Hunter family would not be able to receive guests anyway. He added that Siren and Adriana had never lived in this estate permanently, and usually only stayed here during visits. Lord Gale continued to insist that previously, Siren and Adriana had always only stayed temporarily at the Hunter mansion. However, he then added meaningfully that the situation had now changed, and Serena immediately became wary and coldly asked what exactly had changed now. Lord Gale coughed heavily and hastened to put aside the unpleasant conversation under the noise of the evening garden on the cold terrace. Gale complained to Serene about the drafts and Adriana's eternal whims. Lord Gale spoke more softly and offered Serena to lean on him in difficult times. Serene quietly thanked Gale for his concern, hiding her fatigue in the quiet evening light. Lord Gale leaned over to Serene and reminded her that she would now be the one to preside over the funeral. Under the cold light of the terrace, Gale promised Serene a quiet life after his appointment as guardian. Captain Ash froze behind a column involuntarily, overhearing the conversation between Siren and Lord Gale in the silence of the night. Lord Gale slowly left the terrace, and Captain Ash remained in the shadows, continuing to watch Serena. Siren collapsed onto the cold stone of the terrace and cringed in pain, shivering in the night wind. Captain Ash watched silently from the shadows of the column, grimly monitoring Siren's condition after the conversation. Serena raised her tear-stained face and whispered disgust with hatred, remembering Lord Gale's words. The next morning, in the Order of Lagomali, Captain Ash was already sitting at a table in the middle of a quiet hall. The night scene came back to Siren's mind, and the bitterness and anger only made her heart tighten. Captain Ash twirled his fingers thoughtfully, remembering Siren's hatred after the conversation that night. Dennis grinned and held up the document to Captain Ash, reminding him of his dark thoughts out loud. At the wide table, Dennis spoke sarcastically about the man Siren hated the most. Captain Ash rose abruptly from his chair, and Dennis turned the conversation to the problems of Hunter County. As they walked down the hallway, Dennis calmly discussed the Earl's death and the plight of the Hunter family. Captain Ash walked silently down the bright corridor, listening to Dennis discuss the Hunter family's debts. Dennis confidently told the guests that after becoming her guardian, he would quickly marry Siren off to a nobleman. Captain Ash listened with a frown as they talked about Siren's marriage and the transfer of her title to her younger brother. Under the Lord's dark cloak, the boy looked like a prisoner while he dreamed of ruling Hunter County. Captain Ash's icy gaze revealed that Dennis was about to dispose of the family's fate as if it were his own. Dennis recalled with a grin the rumors of a noisy duel on the training grounds of the Knightly Order. The young knights were animatedly discussing the upcoming battle and were rushing to take the best places near the platform. Dennis stopped the noisy crowd and sternly demanded to know the reason for the commotion in the corridor. The knights excitedly told Dennis about the duel between Ezra Lambert and an unknown opponent. Captain Ash froze with a cold gaze upon hearing the name Siren Hunter amidst the talk of the duel. The young knights looked at each other in confusion, not knowing how to explain the noise on the training ground. 15 minutes ago, Siren confidently entered the Order arena in the bright morning light. Eugene Lambert, with a smug smile, introduced himself as a knight of the 6th Division to the surprised crowd. Serena cautiously pressed her hand to her chest, carefully examining the unfamiliar knight opposite her. Eugene mockingly suggested that Siren unwind with sword training under the curious glances of the knights. Siren narrowed her eyes coldly, and a caustic sarcasm flashed in her violet eyes. Eugene grinned smugly as the knights laughed, enjoying the attention of the noisy crowd around him. Siren crossed her arms and sternly reminded everyone of the discipline of the Knightly Order. Eugene's smile faltered, and the knights behind him looked at each other in surprise at Siren's words. Eugene shouted Ezra Lambert's name in irritation, accusing the surrounding knights of cowardice. Eugene extended his hand to Siren, with a cheeky smile, demanding that discipline be restored according to the rules of the Order. Serena coldly refused Eugene, and a heavy, prickly tension hung in the spacious hall. Eugene mockingly hit Serena's sore wound, reminding her of her fear of losing her beautiful face. A dark memory of the cage, where humiliation sounded more terrible than chains, flashed before Serena's eyes. The dark-haired girl behind bars laughed venomously at Serena, contemptuously humiliating her past life. Siren suddenly drew her sword, and the cold gleam of the blade instantly cut through the noisy hall of the Order. The captain stood silently at the door, watching Serena and the self-confident Eugene closely. Siren and Eugene raised their swords against each other, filling the spacious hall with dangerous tension. Eugene, with a mocking smile, decided to teach Serena a lesson for meeting with the knight of the 12th Squad. Siren gripped her sword tighter and calmly ordered Eugene to attack, maintaining her icy composure. Siren rushed forward with a vengeance, and with fury in her eyes, slammed Eugene's blade into her sword with a powerful blow. Eugene held the sword in front of Serena's face and continued his dangerous game in the arena with a sly grin. Siren jumped back sharply, maintaining her balance, and clutching the sword tightly with trembling fingers. Eugene smirked smugly, deciding that the fragile Serena would quickly lose in a power struggle. Eugene raised his sword high and admitted with irritation that he had never met such a stubborn girl. Siren intercepted Eugene's sword with icy calm, not retreating under the weight of his blow. Eugene looked at Serena in confusion, realizing that she confidently blocked every attack with her blade. The Lord and the Knights watched the fight as Eugene grew increasingly irritated by Serena's tenacity. Siren gritted her teeth and snapped back, barely containing her anger at Eugene's overconfident mockery. Eugene suddenly rushed forward with another blow, not giving Serena a second to breathe. Eugene abruptly broke through Serena's defenses and left a trail of blood on her tense side. The Lord frowned at the unexpected blow, and an uneasy silence fell over the noisy hall for a moment. Dennis chuckled quietly, next to Lord advising him not to flinch at every move Serena made. Siren dropped heavily to her knees, clutching her sword and trying to suppress the searing pain from her wound. Eugene looked coldly at the bent Serena as blood slowly trickled down her white shirt. Serena gripped the sword until her fingers hurt and hissed angrily that she had not lost her caution in the fight at all. Siren spun around and struck with lightning speed, causing Eugene to stagger back from her blade. Siren breathed heavily under the onslaught of Eugene, feeling her strength slowly draining away along with her blood. Siren's bright eyes flashed with irritation as the knights once again began to regard her as a weak girl. Siren suddenly changed her stance in front of Eugene, deciding to forgo the use of force in favor of a clever maneuver. Siren accelerated her movements to the limit and quickly found a moment to wrest the initiative from Eugene. The captain watched the fight with a slight smile, recognizing Siren's rare talent and tenacity in the arena. Eugene let out a painful breath as Siren suddenly broke through his defense with a swift strike of her blade. Eugene lost his balance and fell heavily to the floor, unable to stop Siren's sharp attack. The tip of Siren's sword froze in front of Eugene's face, and for the first time, real fear flashed in his eyes. Siren confidently pointed her sword at Eugene, and the golden glow behind her emphasized her victory. The knights stood frozen outside the arena as Eugene sat on the floor, unable to hide his shock after his defeat by Siren. Dennis applauded loudly with a satisfied smile, and the Lord silently watched the confused Eugene. The knights around the arena began to clap loudly, discussing Siren's unexpected victory over Eugene. Siren lowered her palm in confusion after the fight, while the hall exploded with enthusiastic shouts and applause. Eugene recoiled in irritation after his defeat, while the laughter of the satisfied knights echoed around the arena. Ash calmly extended his hand to Siren and coldly advised her to tie her hair back before training. Siren touched her long locks of hair in confusion, and the scarlet drops of blood on her sleeve reminded her of the duel. The young knights made loud jokes about her hair, enjoying the noise and awkwardness in the middle of the training hall. Siren looked silently at the laughing boys, her purple eyes flashing with heavy irritation. Siren cowered under the icy words of the past, the night wind tangling in her long golden hair. The old man roughly tugged at Siren's locks, mockingly, admiring the shine of her golden locks in front of the crowd. Siren raised her sword sharply and cut off the hair without hesitation, tearing apart the heavy memories of the past. Ash watched the falling locks of hair silently as Dennis shouted her name in shock from the arena. Serena clutched her cut hair tightly in her palms and looked ahead coldly through the golden glow. Ash frowned at Siren's actions and calmly explained that he didn't ask her to cut her hair. Siren, with short curls, stood confidently in the middle of the arena, while the knights looked at each other in confusion. The young knights fell silent near the training hall, hiding their surprise after Siren's abrupt action. Serena looked down at the noisy crowd, her mind heavy with the memories of years of ridicule and humiliation in the past. Serena firmly raised her head towards the light, deciding to no longer live for the sake of other people's cruel words. Dennis frowned next to Ash as he silently held Sirene's cut golden locks in his hand. Ash coldly declared punishment for Eugene, fighting with real swords right in the middle of the training hall. Ash calmly added that Sirene would also be punished, clutching the cut hair tighter in his palm. Moana ran up to Sirene in horror, noticing her short hair and blood on her light-colored sleeve. The knights bustled around Sirene at the exit, while Moana loudly called for a healer because of her friend's injury. Moana panicked and grabbed Sirene by the shoulders, demanding to know who dared to cut off her hair. Moana screamed in shock across the room when she learned that Ash had ordered Sirene to cut her hair. The servants at the door looked at each other in confusion as rumors of what had happened quickly spread throughout the hall. Sirena straightened up calmly amid the noise, her short golden locks swaying softly around her face. Sirena awkwardly touched her new hair and admitted that she wasn't yet used to this length. Sirena looked thoughtfully at the cut locks, wondering how much gold they would give for such a length. Someone else's palms suddenly touched Sirena's short hair, and her thoughts immediately returned to Ash. Siren thought back to Ash Greyward, with a frown growing irritated every time she encountered the cold commander. The night park was drowned in silence, while Siren angrily rubbed her neck and tried to calm her irritation. The maid Anna pressed her palms to her chest, in fear seeing the short hair of the shocked Siren. The Lord furiously crumpled the papers in his office, not finding a single valuable item for sale in the estate. The man angrily threw open the empty safe, and books and documents scattered across the library floor. The Lord turned around sharply amid the chaos, when hurried footsteps were heard in the corridor. Anna almost burst into tears next to Serena as the butler tried to calm her down. Serena quickly entered the hall with Anna and the butler as the house became increasingly uneasy. The manager angrily ordered that the safe be found immediately, and his voice echoed throughout the mansion. Serena asked again about the safe in surprise, carefully watching the confused servants behind her. The manager nervously explained about the hiding places in the office and bedroom, waving his arms in the middle of the corridor. Serena calmly inquired about the rooms that had been checked, while the butler guiltily lowered his tired gaze. Serena firmly stopped her uncle and coldly reminded him that she was now responsible for the future of the Hunter house. Serena nodded calmly to the manager, hiding her fatigue behind a restrained voice and an even gaze. The Lord stared at Sirene's short hair in confusion, remembering her former long locks. The Lord sighed heavily in the middle of the hall, worried that with such a haircut, the knights would stop accepting her. The Lord helplessly spread his hands in front of Serena, reminding her of the missing dowry money. Serena calmly admitted to the Lord that she had spent the family money on her parents' funeral and old debts. The spacious mansion fell silent as Sirene revealed the secret of her late father's loans to the Lord. The Lord turned pale among the scattered coins, not believing Sirene's words about the Hunter family's debts. Serena looked coldly at the Lord, asking directly if he was hiding his own large loans. The Lord nervously looked away, and Serena calmly suggested checking all the estate's papers and accounts. The Lord hurried away through the marble hall, leaving Sirene amidst heavy silence and disturbing thoughts. Serena stood silently by the stairs, the golden light of the hall softly gliding over her short hair. Anna and another maid surrounded Serena with care, rejoicing that her mistress had finally come to her senses. Serena tiredly adjusted her short hair and quietly asked for a hot bath after a hard day. Anna looked at Siren in confusion, still not believing that her luxurious long locks had disappeared forever. Serena smiled lightly, for the first time in a long time, hiding her fatigue behind a soft and calm laugh. Ash met his friend with a cold gaze, while a light breeze swayed the hem of his snow-white cloak. Dennis peeked out from behind the tree cheerfully and began teasing Ash again with the story about the golden hair. Ash closed his eyes tiredly, listening to the ridiculous rumors about how he personally cut off Sirene's hair. Dennis walked alongside Ash with a sly smile, retelling the latest gossip about the Greyward family. Ash coldly reminded Dennis that not all rumors should be spoken aloud in the noisy palace garden. Dennis animatedly recounted the latest gossip about Sirene, while the noblewomen stealthily listened to their conversation. Against a dark sky, Sirene and Ash stood back to back amid rumors of the Hunter family's demise. Dennis recalled with a grin the story of how Sirene had surprised Ash next to a tree. The loudest rumor turned Ash into a ruthless knight, and Sirene into his stubborn opponent. Ash stood irritated in the middle of the empty courtyard, trying to figure out who had spread these ridiculous rumors about Sirene. Dennis looked away nervously when Ash suddenly asked who exactly he had heard these stories from. Dennis scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, remembering his conversations with the chatty maids in the palace corridors. Under the archway, Ash coldly scolded Dennis as his footsteps echoed down the long hallway. Dennis happily surrounded himself with maids in the imperial garden, enjoying the attention and noisy conversations. Dennis smiled carefreely behind Ash's back as he looked gloomily into the distance, losing his patience. Ash cut the conversation off coldly, hiding his irritation behind an even voice and icy calm. Dennis stood frozen in the middle of the corridor, confused, when Ash abruptly suggested that they forget about the strange rumors. Dennis stubbornly followed Ash, continuing the argument about the gossip that had taken over the entire imperial court. Ash turned sharply at the massive doors, annoyed that Dennis was blowing other people's stupid stories out of proportion. Ash wearily opened the doors to the hall, hoping that the noisy rumors about Sirene would soon disappear on their own. In the courtyard, Sirene was practicing her sword again, as the sun shimmered among the white flowers. Dennis looked at Siren in amazement, noticing how her short hair made her movements faster and sharper. Siren quickly dodged blows during training, easily cutting through the air with her silver blade. Ash watched Siren carefully as the cold light of the hall reflected off her sharp sword. Siren was once again overcome by heavy memories, where blood fear and the cold gleam of a sword mixed in the darkness. Siren swung her blade sharply, cutting through the air with a swift strike amidst the bright lights of the training hall. Ash instantly stopped her sword at her shoulder, holding Siren with a calm and firm movement. Ash looked closely at Siren, noticing the worry in her eyes after the unexpected clash of blades. Siren gripped her sword tighter with trembling fingers, trying to hide her excitement behind a focused gaze. Siren jerked away from Ash, breathing heavily after the dangerous clash of blades in the training hall. Siren covered her lips with her hand in embarrassment, as Ash calmly watched her with his sword in his hand. Ash quietly admitted his mistake, looking down after Siren suddenly appeared behind him. Siren frowned, realizing that she hadn't even been able to catch Ash's footsteps amidst the intense training. Ash calmly asked Siren to come into his office, and her purple eyes widened in surprise. Siren froze in surprise in the middle of the hall, while Ash calmly reminded her about breaking the rules of chivalry. Siren covered her lips with her hand, remembering that duels with real swords had long been banned. In the vast palace, Sir Lambert silently scrubbed the training hall, serving his punishment for a dangerous fight. Serena asked in confusion about the whole month of cleaning, not hiding her sincere surprise at such a punishment. Ash met Siren's gaze calmly, making it clear that the punishment was fair, and there was no point in discussing it. Serena quietly refused to argue, and still confused after her conversation with Ash, headed towards the commander's office. Stopping at the heavy doors, Serena quietly introduced herself and asked permission to enter. Hearing the short permission, Serena carefully opened the door, still not understanding why she had been called. Looking into the office, Siren called out to the commander in surprise, but it was completely empty inside. Left alone in the quiet office, Siren looked around in confusion and decided to wait a little for Ash to return. Sat down tiredly on the sofa in the office, Siren finally allowed herself to breathe out after everything that had happened on the training ground. Looking back, Serena realized that for the first time in a long time, she was back at the training ground. Previously as a lady, she often missed training, and the commander constantly reprimanded her. Ash's stern voice came to mind, telling Siren that relying solely on natural talent without practicing was like rusting a precious sword. At that time, Siren did not take his words seriously, considering talk about talent to be empty, moralizing. But now, after the duel and all the events, her attitude has changed. Serena was going through old memories of the palace and words about talent sitting on a soft sofa. An image of a young queen appeared before Serena, confidently speaking of the hidden power of man. In the middle of the golden hall, Siren remembered the mysterious man next to the queen and frowned. Siren touched her chest in thought as the warm light of the office softly fell on her face. Ash entered the office silently, and Siren stood up abruptly, meeting his gaze with confusion. Ash calmly entered the office, shaking the cold of the street off his cloak after long palace affairs. Siren stood up awkwardly in front of Ash, her hand clenched tighter at her waist in nervousness. Ash confidently crossed the office, and Siren tried to understand the reason for this strange call. Ash sat down on the couch and spoke seriously, causing Siren to stand guard nearby. Hearing about the two punishments, Siren frowned, remembering Eugene and the training ground. Siren froze at Ash's words, when instead of punishment, she heard a marriage proposal. A confused Siren looked up at Ash, not believing what she was hearing in the quiet office. Ash calmly explained to Siren the benefits of the engagement, reminding her of the title and family inheritance. Serena nervously retreated to the sofa, clenching her fingers in surprise and intense embarrassment. Ash gently gave Siren time to think, as an image of their future together flashed through her mind. Siren flushed with indignation, raising her voice sharply after Ash's unexpected proposal. Siren looked at Ash with confusion, not understanding how the engagement had anything to do with inheriting the title. Siren froze by the sofa, her face pale as the strict imperial laws came to mind. The image of the queen and the ancient rules about the purity of imperial blood flashed before Siren's eyes. Siren sank heavily onto the sofa, knowing that marrying Ash would ruin her path to the throne. Ash calmly confirmed Siren's words, maintaining a cold expression on his face in the silence of the office. Serena clutched the collar of her uniform in confusion, not understanding why the conversation had suddenly turned to the throne. An image of the emperor and the queen, who had already taken her place next to him, flashed before Serena. Ash thoughtfully discussed the heir as he sat quietly in the warm light of his luxurious office. Siren leaned over the table abruptly, flushing in shock at Ash's words about the queen. Ash frowned and quickly tried to smooth over the dangerous conversation by keeping a calm tone. Serena covered her mouth with her hand and looked away in embarrassment, trying to correct her slip of the tongue. Siren felt a chill at the memory of the bloody reception and the death of the former queen. After the tragedy, the Knights of the Guard were blamed for the incident and quickly expelled from the order. Siren clutched her uniform tightly, realizing how close she had come to death. Siren leaned towards Ash, sharply remembering future receptions with the queen and the mortal threat. The golden light of the office flickered as Siren leaned her palms heavily on the long table. Siren pressed her palm to her chest and asked Ash for help hiding her growing panic. Ash froze in surprise as Siren grabbed his snow-white uniform tightly. Ash tiredly touched his temple with his hand and calmly sat the worried Siren back down on the sofa. Ash calmly told Siren about the knightly order ceremony scheduled for next month. Siren's violet eyes flashed with alarm as the memory of the future came together abruptly, the dark hall drowned in blood and the gleam of a sword where the dead queen lay among the scarlet stains. Siren clenched her fists in determination and vowed to change the Empire's cruel future at any cost. Ash looked at Siren carefully, waiting for the reason for her frightened refusal of the engagement. Serena nervously clenched her glove and admitted that marriage to the commander sounded too scary. The golden light of the office flickered as Siren reminded Ash of his earlier taunt about marriage. Ash slowly rose from the couch, his cold tone instantly making the atmosphere heavier than before. Siren stood there confused as Ash compared being engaged to himself to a real punishment. Ash carefully took Siren's hand as the warm light from the fireplace glided softly across the office. Siren sat up straight on the couch, tense, as Ash asked her to listen to a serious question. Amidst the golden flowers and glow, Ash looked straight at Siren and proposed to her. Siren looked at Ash with confusion, trying to understand the reason for his unexpected offer. The dark shadow of the palace fell over the office as Ash spoke of the Emperor's own order. Siren clutched the collar of her uniform tightly, hiding her anxiety after hearing about her engagement to Ash. Heavy thoughts overwhelmed Siren as the image of the cruel king appeared before her eyes. In the blue flashes of the past, Siren remembered the jealous king who lost control around others. Siren looked down nervously, reminding herself that the future cruel king had not yet appeared. Serena rose abruptly from the sofa and demanded that Ash honestly state the reason for the engagement. Ash calmly approached Siren and admitted that it all started because of dangerous rumors. The cold scene with the sword flashed before Siren's eyes as Ash spoke of her family's death. Siren turned pale and turned away sharply, not wanting to believe the accusations against Ash. Shattered memories flashed before Siren as Ash's words of dark obsession cut through the silence. Ash gave a small chuckle, calling the palace a place where even the wildest rumors could quickly grow. In the dark throne room, the angry emperor looked coldly at Ash after the shameful conversations. Ash knelt before the throne, trying to convince the king not to ruin his life with empty accusations. The old king clasped his chin with his hand and decided to get rid of the rumors in a more drastic way. The old king, with a grim smile, ordered Ash to marry Siren to save his reputation. Ash looked up tensely, trying to hide his anxiety after the emperor's cruel words. The vast throne room was filled with cold as the king's command sounded heavy and merciless. Ash lowered his head wearily and admitted to Siren that he had only managed to achieve an engagement instead of marriage. Saren covered her lips with her hand, amazed at how much fate had changed after returning back in time. Siren thoughtfully covered her lips with her hand, calculating the consequences of her engagement to Commander Ash. Serena calmly suggested breaking off the engagement after her 21st birthday. Ash visibly tensed in his chair as he heard Siren's confident plan for breaking off the engagement. The warm office was filled with silence as Siren explained the benefits of a temporary engagement for the palace. Siren looked at Ash confidently, suggesting that they use the engagement simply to suppress rumors. Ash looked at Siren carefully finding out if she had a man in mind. Serena calmly admitted that after the captain, she no longer intended to tie herself down in marriage. Ash tightened his grip on Siren's slender fingers as she sheepishly explained her dislike of being touched. The golden light of the office flickered as Serena confidently promised to break off the engagement at 21. The young maid froze in surprise with her broom when she met Dennis early in the morning in the corridors of the palace. Dennis showered the maid with compliments, smiling broadly and enjoying her embarrassment at the palace doors. A cheerful Dennis burst into Ash's office, nearly pinning him against the heavy wooden door. Ash held Dennis's neck coldly as he nervously questioned him about the captain's visit. Dennis rubbed the back of his head awkwardly in the luxurious office, justifying his sudden appearance. A sly grin flashed across Dennis's face as he confessed his desire to become close to the aristocrats. Dennis reminded Ash of his title with a grin as sunlight softly flooded the spacious office. A cheerful Dennis theatrically complained about the arrogant nobles, and Ash only calmly chuckled in response. Dennis lounged comfortably on the sofa and curiously asked Ash about the summons to the palace. Ash crossed his arms over his chest, listening coldly to Dennis's guesses about punishment and house arrest. Ash's face turned serious as he calmly confessed to Dennis the king's order to marry. Dennis sat up straight on the couch, staring at Ash in shock at the news of the impending marriage. Ash coldly announced his engagement to Serena Hunter, while Dennis shook his head in confusion. Dennis laughed nervously as he recalled the Hunter family's plight and precarious future. The cold night background enveloped Seren as the conversation turned to debt ruin and the plight of the family. Dennis frowned at the mention of the ancient Hunter tradition involving a knightly order and a curse. The order's shining crest towered over Seren, a reminder of the Hunter family's ancient oath to serve the knights. Dennis listened intently to Ash as the conversation slowly turned to lineage and family obligations. A slight grin crossed Ash's face as he called Serene his perfect bride. The king sat gloomily on his throne, hiding his anxiety for the empire and the fate of his heirs under a cold gaze. Ash walked confidently through the dark hall of the palace, understanding the king's irritation due to his high position. Ash looked calmly out the palace window, accepting his engagement to Serene as a beneficial union for both families. Moana let out a stunned scream in the middle of the hallway when she heard the unexpected news of the engagement. Moana covered her mouth with her hand in fear, while Siren calmly watched her violent reaction. The girl grabbed Serene's hands tightly in the hallway, excitedly asking about the captain and the wedding. Serena coldly crossed her arms over her chest and briefly confirmed that the order came personally from the king. Moana looked at Siren in shock when she heard about the king's order to arrange her engagement to Ash. Moana threw up her hands in the middle of the palace corridor, outraged by the rumors and the strange decision of the old people. Moana's face turned pale with horror when Siren calmly spoke about the possibility of breaking off the engagement. The magnificent wedding dress filled Moana's imagination as she excitedly imagined Siren as the captain's bride. Siren looked ahead in confusion, trying to remember when she had managed to say something so strange. Moana looked at Siren with concern, reminding him of the hard life she had lived with her stern and dangerous uncle. Serena offered to help with family matters, with genuine interest trying to support the confused Moana. Moana looked down in embarrassment, admitting that she was completely inept at keeping complex accounting books. Moana pointed excitedly into the distance, intending to introduce Siren to the person who could help. Ash and Dennis walked confidently through the palace courtyard, heavy cloaks fluttering behind them. Ash's warm smile made Siren tense up again, remembering their all-too-frequent meetings in the palace. Serena pressed her lips together in worry as thoughts of engagement became more and more confused in her head. Moana quickly covered Siren's mouth with her hand, preventing her from accidentally calling out to Ash in the hallway. Moana asked Siren in surprise about her strange avoidance of her fiancé and her family duties after the engagement. Siren leaned tiredly against the wall, and Moana gently advised her to have an honest talk with Ash. In the huge hall of the palace, courtiers were already gathering around Ash and Seiren, awaiting big news. Ash maintained a calm demeanor as the aristocrats' gazes increasingly drifted toward the upcoming engagement. Moana walked briskly next to Seiren, trying to lighten the heavy atmosphere of the palace with conversation. Seiren smiled reservedly, although inside she was still troubled by Ash's words and the king's order. Ash confidently prepared to announce the news to the palace as golden light filled the opulent imperial hall. In the spacious hall of the palace, the courtiers around Ash began to buzz, waiting for a loud official announcement. Seiren and Moana exchanged wary glances among the knights as anxiety slowly grew in the girls' chests. Moana leaned quietly towards Seiren, who turned pale, already guessing the reason for the meeting. Seiren pressed her lips together tightly, trying to push away thoughts of getting engaged in front of the entire imperial court. Ash maintained a cool calm as the golden light of the palace highlighted his confident and stern gaze. Ash strode confidently across the bustling hall towards Seiren as the courtiers stood guard around them. Ash's warm hand fell on Seiren's shoulder, and the girl froze among the knights' tense gazes. Under the glow of golden light, Ash calmly announced the engagement, while Seiren paled in shock. Moana and the other knights looked at each other in amazement, not hiding their strong emotions after the captain's words. Anxious whispers arose among the crowd, and the young knights tried to understand the reasons for the engagement in confusion. Ash smiled confidently at the crowd, while Seiren stood next to him, barely hiding her confusion and growing embarrassment. In the noisy hall, the captain ordered the gossip to stop, and the knights exchanged awkward glances. New speculation quickly spread among the crowd, turning Ash and Seiren's engagement into a love drama. The young knights whispered among themselves, trying to connect the palace rumors with the captain's sudden announcement. Moana touched her chest thoughtfully, marveling at how easily the old courtly methods worked again. Moana listened attentively to the knights' conversation, while the surprised palace continued to make noise around the hall. The tall knight next to Moana frowned with displeasure, considering the sudden engagement too old-fashioned a decision. In the vast hall, the courtiers began to discuss the date of the official announcement of Seiren's engagement with increasing loudness. Ash leaned calmly towards Seiren as the girl looked up warily amidst the golden glow of the palace. The captain gently suggested that Seiren speak alone, and her face instantly tightened with embarrassment. In the quiet palace garden, Seiren clasped her hands in confusion, trying to accept her sudden engagement to Ash. Ash watched Seiren with a slight smile as they continued their conversation in the cool morning light. Seiren suddenly tensed up after Ash's unexpected question about male touch and intimacy. Ash calmly explained his curiosity, reminding Seiren of their unexpected engagement in front of the courtyard. Seiren looked down at her trembling fingers, afraid to admit her true feelings to Ash. Seiren recalled the cruel secrets of the past king, where the future queen was exposed for the sake of power and rumors. Under the shade of the trees, Seiren quietly admitted to Ash that men's touches made her uneasy. Ash watched Seiren closely as she nervously pressed her hand to her trembling heart. Ash's cold gaze grew more serious as he carefully tried to find out the real reason for her fear. Seiren raised her stubborn gaze and briefly repeated her answer, hiding old wounds behind her calm. Ash watched Seiren, closely realizing that her fear was connected to a man from her difficult past. Seiren looked up in confusion as Ash coldly suggested getting rid of the man who had hurt her. The evening garden darkened, and Ash's voice sounded harsh and dangerous, demanding to know the culprit of the suffering. Seiren pressed her lips together in worry, trying to understand why Ash was reacting so strongly to someone else's story. Ash abruptly ended the conversation and turned away, hiding his irritation behind the usual calm of the knight captain. Ash gently asked Seiren to call him by his first name, reminding him of their surprise engagement in front of the court. Seiren looked up in confusion, not understanding how to communicate with Ash now that the announcement had been made in the hall. Sitting on a cold garden bench, Seiren quietly admitted that the rumors about their marriage were dangerous for both of them. Under the gray sky of the palace, the girl looked down, tiredly, hiding her anxiety about the real reason for the engagement. Ash smiled calmly and called Seiren by name, for the first time making the conversation unexpectedly warm. Ash asked about Seiren's nickname with a slight smile, while the girl lowered her purple eyes tensely. Seiren's memory flashed with the cruel rumors of the palace, where her name was associated with shame and temptation. Seiren quickly corrected Ash, trying to hide her worry behind a calm and cold expression. Golden leaves swirled slowly in the garden, as Ash earnestly asked Seiren to listen to him carefully. In the quiet palace courtyard, Ash reminded her of the upcoming engagement announcement, and Siren froze in confusion. Siren awkwardly agreed to discuss the birthday, trying to remain calm around Ash. Ash smiled softly and turned the conversation to a more important topic, watching her reaction carefully. Siren turned around warily as Ash placed his hand on the back of her bench and approached. Leaning close to her, Ash reminded her of the mystery of real swords and the knight's training ground. A look of worry flashed across Siren's eyes as she tried to understand the hidden meaning behind Ash's words. Ash leaned very close to Siren and quietly stated that she should receive real punishment for lying about the real swords. Siren asked confusedly what kind of punishment he meant, while Ash was looming over her over the back of the bench. Instead of answering, Ash only smiled mysteriously, clearly enjoying her confusion and anxiety. Siren walked slowly down the academy hallway, trying to calm down after her tense conversation with Ash. Suddenly, her name was called, and Siren turned around in surprise at the familiar voice. Moana ran up to her immediately, noticing her friend's confused state and curiously asking what had happened. Moana angrily complained that Ash had suddenly announced shocking news and then disappeared, so now she was demanding details from Siren. Serena, trying to hide her embarrassment, began to evasively talk about the punishment that the commander had assigned to her. Hearing the word punishment, Moana instantly panicked and assumed it was a harsh duel with real swords or hard physical labor. However, Serena quickly changed the subject and admitted that starting tomorrow, she would simply have to clean out the archive. After this, the girls headed together to the academy building, and the tension between them gradually gave way to ordinary friendly conversation. On the way to the archive, Siren and Moana admitted that they only recently learned about the existence of this place in the nightly order. They were met by a calm archival employee who explained that the building also served as a warehouse for the order's old items. Moana looked around the room in surprise and admitted that she had passed by many times without even suspecting that an archive was located here. Before starting work, the custodian gave Serene a cloth mask and told her to cover her nose and mouth tightly because of the dust inside the building. Serena looked at the mask in confusion, realizing that the cleaning ahead would not be easy at all. Serena asked in surprise why it was necessary to cover her face so tightly with a mask before entering the archive. The archive keeper calmly explained that a huge amount of dust had accumulated inside because the room had not been cleaned for many months. When the door opened, a thick cloud of dust immediately burst out, forcing everyone to cover their faces. Moana looked at Siren with concern and noted that it would be difficult for her to handle such cleaning alone. However, Siren decided to stoically accept the punishment, convincing herself that cleaning the archive was still better than dangerous training with real swords. The archive's keeper, covering his face with a mask, joked that he sympathized with whoever had to clean up the place. After these words, he quickly left, leaving the girls alone with the huge, dusty archive. Moana immediately offered to help Siren with the cleaning, not wanting to leave her friend alone. But Serena refused, reminding him that this was an official punishment, and outside help could cause unnecessary talk among those around him. Moana smiled and remarked that then everyone would think that Lady Hunter had special trust in the Lambert family, and these words made Siren freeze in surprise. Moana's words about trust suddenly made Siren laugh, although before such things only caused her pain and humiliation. Hiding her laughter behind her mask, Siren quickly sent Moana away, declaring that she had helped enough and could now go about her business. Left alone in the archive, Serena immediately began heavy cleaning, struggling to cope with the thick dust and stuffiness of the room. After a long day of work, she straightened up tiredly and took off her mask, feeling that it was finally easier to breathe. Despite her fatigue, Siren realized that she was gradually beginning to get used to her unusual punishment and the changes happening around her. After examining the old archive, Siren was relieved to notice that despite the enormous amount of dust, there seemed to be no rats or other pests here. Deciding that cleaning wouldn't be so daunting, she began carefully removing books from the shelves and shaking off years of dust. While Serena was stacking books for cleaning, an old sheet of paper suddenly fell out of one of them. Surprised, she quickly caught it and noticed a strange drawing and text on the sheet, clearly related to something ancient or important. Serena became wary and wondered which book this mysterious page could have fallen from. Serena decided to check which book the mysterious leaf had fallen from and quickly found a volume with a similar design on the shelf. Taking the heavy book in her hands, she carefully opened it and began to turn the pages carefully, comparing the drawings and frames with the sheet she had found. Very soon, Serena became convinced that the sheet really belonged to this book. the style of the illustrations, and the text were completely identical. The book turned out to be an ancient legend about a dragon, thanks to which, as the text said, the current Timos appeared. The spread depicted a huge black dragon, and the caption explained that it was the dragon Timos who once ruled the monsters. Under the vaults of the old library, Siren leafed through a book about the dragon Timos amidst dull gold and dust. The pages were filled with terrifying stories about monsters that the dragon drove against people for the sake of chaos and fear. The illustration of the 5 heroes shone with the light of victory, and behind their backs, the majestic Timos was already rising. Between the pages, notes flashed about monsters that had gone into the forests after the death of the dragon and the fall of his power. Siren stopped at the drawing of a woman with black hair and eyes clutching the tattered sheet of paper tighter. On the glowing page, Ash Gravor stood among golden patterns, and Siren thoughtfully compared the details. Sitting among the tall bookcases, Siren frowned as she leafed through the book, remembering Ash's dark hair and cold eyes. The name Gravor escaped her lips as her fingers nervously clutched the heavy tome in the quiet library. Serena looked up sharply, because the name Gravor did not at all suit the man from the ancient legend. The unexpected conclusion made Siren jerk back, dropping the book right in front of Ash, who approached. Among the dusty shelves, Ash calmly asked Siren about fear as the golden light fell on the books. Ash reminded Siren, with a slight smile, that it was she who had invited him to the old library. Siren explained the situation sheepishly from the top of the stairs, while Ash listened attentively from below. Under the soft light of the lamps, Siren spoke carefully about the Graver family name and its collateral branch. Ash looked down at the old book and quietly admitted that the history of the Graver family was almost unknown. Ash slowly flipped through the ancient book and reminded Siren of the strongest knight who became king in the dark history of the Gravor family. There was a rule hidden. After marriage, a woman lost the family name. Even the head of the family could not keep her name, so the king chose a special solution for the family. Among the red roses, the book revealed a secret. The surname Gravor was created in honor of the knight's beloved woman. The daughter of that heiress became the queen of Timos, and the ancient line continued to live through generations of princes. In the warm light of the library, Siren listened intently to Ash as the family history slowly unfolded. Ash approached Siren and quietly spoke about purple eyes, carefully studying her face. Siren looked up in confusion, her violet eyes trembling under the weight of the strange implication. On the pages of the book, a dark-haired warrior cut through the air with a sword, leaving behind a purple light. The knight's purple eyes blazed brightly among the shadows, while Siren was carefully reading the ancient legend. Serena thoughtfully went over the facts about the Purple Eye nickname, trying to understand the origins of the Gravors. Ash calmly explained to Serene that the gray color of the sword's aura was considered a rare gift among masters. Siren looked at her palms with curiosity, thinking about the mysterious aura of the sword and its power. Among the tall bookcases, Siren asked Ash how old he was when he became a swordmaster. Ash calmly replied that he had achieved the rank of master at 21, without taking his eyes off the shelf. In the warm library, Siren frowned, considering such a path too difficult and too early for a person. Ash looked at Serene with a slight smile. He decided to reveal to her the important secret of their engagement. Serena quietly fiddled with her fingers, thinking about the king for whom power was more important than his own children. Siren listened intently to Ash as the warm light of the library glided over the tall shelves and books. The old king stood among the shadows of the palace, guarding the throne and hiding the prince's power from the nobility. Serena pressed her fingers to her lips, thoughtfully, trying to understand the strict rules of the royal family. Siren's quiet voice cut through the silence of the library, reminding Ash of the king's cruel priorities. The lonely king in his heavy robe walked away into the darkness of the palace, leaving his children without attention and warmth. Ash spoke calmly about the royal family, while Siren sat opposite him among the old wooden boxes. A sharp signal of encouragement echoed throughout the library, causing Ash and Siren to stand up instantly. The red-haired knight opened the door and worriedly reported about monsters on the outskirts of the capital of Tamos. Siren's purple eyes widened in alarm, and a bead of sweat slowly slid down her cheek. The knight reported too many monsters, and a heavy tension immediately fell over the hall. Under the freezing rain, white monsters rushed through the forest, leaving behind bloody traces and chaos. Siren covered her mouth with her hand, quickly counting the monsters near the capital and the strength of the knightly squads. Siren ran out of the library quickly, clutching her uniform and catching Ash's surprised gaze. A daring thought flashed through Siren's mind, and her purple eyes lit up with determination and excitement. Ash confidently descended the steps of the palace, sending nightly squads to meet dangerous monsters. Siren turned sharply towards the stairs, deciding to send her 12th squad to help the capital. The bright corridor flashed behind Siren as Ash watched her quick steps in surprise. Serena turned around as she walked, clutching her uniform tighter and confidently heading towards the knights. Siren's violet eyes flashed with stubbornness as she asked for permission to march with the squad. Ash smiled softly near the red-haired knight, preparing to explain to Siren the true reason for his refusal. Ash calmly instructed Siren to come to the stables, where the vanguard was already being assembled for the departure to the capital. A joyful smile lit up Siren's face, and her violet eyes sparkled brightly with delight. Siren quickly led the light horse into the courtyard, adjusting her heavy cloak and silver armor. In her knightly armor, Siren looked more confident, and the wind gently swayed her golden hair. The knights of the first detachment gathered in the courtyard, surrounding their horses and weapons before the dangerous march. Cold memories brought Siren back to the past, where the knights of the first squad led her to the dungeon. Siren abruptly stopped her heavy thoughts and focused again on the noisy courtyard of the knightly order. Ticker Graves greeted Siren with a wide smile, his silver armor flashing among the assembled knights. Old memories flashed before Siren again, reminding her of the dark future of Queen Timos. The fair-haired knight looked ahead intently, while Siren reflected on his difficult fate. Lauren sharply pulled Ticker up as the knights of the first squad gathered for the urgent departure. Lauren was seriously checking the squad's readiness, adjusting his armor under the bright light of the training yard. Ash Gravor calmly addressed Siren, and the girl looked up at the captain in confusion. Ash apologized for Ticker with a slight smile, while Siren silently listened to the knight's explanation. Serena quietly accepted her new name, and the captain watched her calm reaction with surprise. Ash confidently led the knights forward, the sunlight glinting off the silver of their heavy armor. Serena gripped the reins tighter as she listened to the words about the 3 chevals and the difficult path to the top of the order. A bright fire flared in Siren's eyes as the girl dreamed of becoming famous for a great feat. The gray monsters furiously tore through the knights' ranks, while the 10th Squad's fighters called for reinforcements through the chaos. The huge beast slashed at the knight with its claws, and scarlet splashes flew across the squad's wet armor. Siren pulled sharply on the reins as a cry of pain cut through the noise of the battle in the dark forest. The white horse rushed forward, and Siren's cloak fluttered behind her in the strong wind. Ash turned around tensely to follow Siren, worry quickly replacing his usual calm. Ash pulled on the reins sharply, as Siren without hesitation charged straight towards the enraged monsters. Lauren called out anxiously after Siren, as the wind ruffled the scarlet tail of his long hair. Serena nimbly jumped off her horse, and her heavy cloak fluttered above the grass of the dense forest. Siren's purple eyes flashed with determination as she charged towards the beast. A sharp blade cut through the gray monster, and drops of blood streaked the air above the knight's cloak. The wounded knight staggered heavily, blood trickling down the silver plates of his shattered armor. Ash jerked the reins forward, sensing danger amid the roar of the monsters and the chaos of the battle. Ticker whistled in surprise as he watched Siren hold his own against the massive beast. The gray monster suddenly leaped from above, and Siren raised her sword sharply to meet its sharp fangs. Siren chuckled darkly after the blow, delighted at the short hair beneath the ferocious monster's claws. Siren shielded the wounded knights with her body as they gratefully crawled back into the safe shade of the forest. 2 huge monsters slowly surrounded Siren, growling among the grass and broken branches of the clearing. Siren gripped her sword tighter, assessing the size of the beasts before facing a tough fight all alone. The girl rushed forward furiously, cutting down the gray monster with a powerful blow of her shining blade. The huge beasts continued to advance on Siren as her cloak fluttered through the noisy forest. Siren froze tensely as violet eyes caught new movement among the gray shadows of the forest. The enormous monsters slowly closed in on Siren, growling and burying their sharp fangs in the darkness. One beast suddenly rushed forward, and the heavy carcass hung over Siren like a mortal threat. Ash instantly pulled Siren towards him, shielding the girl from the huge monster's furious attack. Ash's black blade cut through the gray beast, and thick blood splashed onto the grass of the forest clearing. Ash turned angrily to Siren as the monster's blood dripped down his armor in crimson drops. Ash coldly reminded her of the order, and Siren stubbornly turned away amid the noisy forest battle. Siren rushed forward after Ash, while heavy blades cut through the grass under the monster's feet. 3 huge beasts rose before Ash, their yellow eyes gleaming in the gloomy forest darkness. Lauren rushed past, cutting down the monster with one precise blow of his bloody sword. Lauren praised Seiren with a grin as the knights stood back to back in the midst of the battle. Ash silently covered Seiren with his sword, while Lauren discussed the skills of the captain's bride with interest. Ticker smiled mockingly, remembering the previous duel and the confused faces of the knights after the battle. Ash calmly acknowledged Seiren's strength, and the girl turned around in surprise in the thick forest fog. Seiren slashed sharply at the monster, and dark blood splashed across the grass of the clearing in wide sprays. Ash watched Seiren closely and recognized her rare talent in swordsmanship among knights. Ash quickly shielded Seiren with his hand as a huge wolf leaped down from the shadows of the forest. Ash's blade slashed furiously through the monster's side, and Seiren froze nearby amidst the flying dust. Ash coldly pointed out Seiren's weak defense from above, continuing to fend off the beast's attacks with his sword. Serena silently gripped the hilt of her sword, and with a stubborn look prepared for a new fight. Dennis mused with frustration about the gap between the knights, while Serena held her sword confidently behind her. The lady furiously cut through the monster and admitted that it was easy to lose oneself next to strong allies. She frowned at Seiren, realizing that her tenacity and strength stood out even now. Seiren lunged forward like lightning, her silver blade flashing amid the blood and jagged shadows. Ash wiped the blood from his cheek and asked coldly about the casualties looking around the field after the hard fight. Serena listened tiredly to the reports from the squads and breathed a sigh of relief when she learned that there were no casualties. Under the crimson sunset, Seiren slowly removed her glove, trying to calm the trembling from the fight. Ash called out to Seiren from the quieting camp, and the girl immediately raised her wary gaze. Ash sternly reminded Seiren of the knight's formation as she stubbornly justified her charge forward. Ash's cold tone became harsher as he accused Seiren of disobeying orders during the battle. Seiren firmly reminded Ash that she had rushed forward to save her comrades amidst the chaos of battle. Ash looked at Seiren heavily under the crimson sky, waiting to hear her real reason. Serena admitted that she was eager to distinguish herself and was quietly proud of her victory over the monsters. Ash listened to Seiren with restraint as she tried to prove the value of her actions. Ash's cold gaze grew serious as he slowly said Seiren's name into the silence. Ash coldly placed Seiren under house arrest, leaving her frozen under the blazing evening sky. Ash sternly reminded Seiren that her recklessness had almost resulted in her death among the monsters. Seiren paled when Ash's words touched on her family and younger brother, waiting for her at home. Seiren lowered her head guiltily before Ash accepting the weight of her own mistake for the first time. Ash coldly ordered Seiren to spend a week under arrest and reflect on her dangerous behavior. Seiren watched Ash walk away in silence as the evening light slowly faded among the trees. Lauren hurried to catch up with Ash as the commander walked silently down the sunset-drenched camp road. Lauren cautiously stood up for Seiren, reminding Ash of her bravery and accomplishments in battle. Ash paused for only a moment, his cold profile clearly showing his unwavering determination. Lauren raised his palms nervously and quickly retreated, realizing the seriousness of his commander's anger. Serena was left alone in the golden light, taking the punishment and the bitterness of exclusion hard. Lauren gently stopped Seiren in the middle of the sunset forest and looked at her tired face with concern. Lauren calmly acknowledged Serena's mistake, and the girl calmly accepted the gravity of her actions. Lauren's warm smile surprised Seiren as the knight sincerely praised her courage in battle. Lauren confidently introduced himself as a knight of the first squad, and Seiren looked up at him in confusion. Serena politely stated her name, while Lauren, with a slight grin, reminded her of her fame. Serena sincerely praised Lauren's skills and confidently predicted that he would attain a high knightly rank. Lauren winked playfully at Seiren and offered an easy offer of friendship in the warm evening light of the camp. In the barracks, the knights were noisily discussing Seiren's week-long suspension after a dangerous violation of orders. One of the knights acknowledged the severity of the punishment, recalling the fighters Seiren had saved after the battle. The young knight looked down thoughtfully, as everyone around him continued to admire Seiren's courage. The knights increasingly recalled how Seiren fought fiercely among the monsters in the forest thicket. Seiren raised her sword confidently, and her fighting skills amazed even the experienced warriors of the squad. The young knight admitted thoughtfully that he had previously considered Seiren's successes to be mere luck on the battlefield. Seiren pressed her fingers tensely to her lips as the stern voices of the nobility sounded outside the palace doors. In the luxurious hall, a woman in purple abruptly stopped Siren, blocking her path in front of the stairs. Adriana flushed with anger, her purple dress shaking from the sudden movements and loud accusations. The servants were confusedly making excuses to Adriana, while Sirena sat calmly at the far table. Hearing about the invitation from Duke Grave, Siren looked up in surprise at the angry Adriana. Siren's slender fingers slid over the dark book, and her thoughts returned to the conversation about the banquet. In the cold garden, the commander calmly reminded Siren of her upcoming birthday and the upcoming holiday. Sirena answered Adriana coldly, without lifting her hand from the heavy book on the light table. Adriana's name sounded sharp, and her bright eyes flickered at Siren's unexpected tone. Sirena sat up straight in her chair, and with an icy gaze reminded him who was the mistress of this house. Adriana lost her previous ardor, nervously squeezing her fingers against the luxurious purple dress. Tension hung between the girls as Serena calmly questioned the Hunter family's words. Serena listened calmly to Adriana's words, and her violet eyes flashed coldly above her dark collar. Adriana waved her hand nervously at the long table as Serena indifferently flipped through the papers in front of her. The talk of the dress made the air heavier, and the fire in the fireplace flickered brightly behind the servants. Adriana's face flushed with indignation when the argument over the expensive dress reached the point of paying the bill. Serena crossed her arms in the chair and calmly sent Adriana to deal with her uncle personally. The words about the score made Siren frown, and the golden curls of her hair trembled softly above her eyes. A dark image of a prison and a cold girl behind black bars flashed through Siren's mind. The elderly butler entered the office cautiously, breaking the heavy silence that followed the quarrel with Adriana. The young servant quickly announced the guests from the nightly order as the doors quietly swung open. Serena rose slowly from her chair and greeted the unexpected news of the visit with caution. Serena calmly ordered the guests to be let in and coldly sent Adriana to sort out the payment for the dresses. Adriana flushed with anger at the open doors as the servant tried to hold her by the elbow. The heavy door slowly closed in front of Adriana, leaving her alone in the long corridor of the mansion. The young servant carefully asked Adriana to move on as the voices in the hall faded away. Adriana abruptly pulled away from the stranger's arms and angrily reminded him how well she knew this mansion. Adriana thundered across the marble floor, showering Siren with venomous accusations and anger. Adriana's face trembled with rage, and her yellow eyes flashed with resentment and hidden irritation. Walking along the rich corridor, Adriana angrily recalled her sick father and the warm rooms of the mansion. Adriana's thoughts grew darker and darker, while her envy of Siren's quiet life only grew. Adriana kicked the door with a bang, her heavy purple dress flying across the marble. Adriana lashed out at Ezra Hunter with rage, remembering her sister, and shaking with anger. The servants roughly pushed Adrian out of the hall, while Ezra coldly watched the noisy scandal. Adriana snapped at Serena, showering her with caustic reproaches and predicting her imminent expulsion. Serena leaned wearily over the bills, clutching her temples after a difficult conversation with Adrian. Siren covered her eyes with her palms as pain and anxiety slowly washed over the quiet office. Ash suddenly appeared in front of the confused Serena with a large bouquet of light lilies. Ash looked calmly at Siren in the golden light, carefully holding the flowers in his hands. Siren sheepishly recognized Ash as the nightly order's guest as he gently handed over the bouquet. Serena clutched the bouquet to her chest in confusion as Ash's words warmed her cold evening. Serena carefully examined the delicate lilies, marveling at the rare winter flowers and their freshness. Years of a past life, without the warmth gifts and sincere attention of loved ones, surfaced in Serena's memory. Siren closed her eyes, inhaling the sweet scent of flowers in the soft glow of the cozy office. Ash watched Siren by the fireplace with restraint, pleased by her quiet and unexpectedly warm smile. Ash watched Siren with a slight smile, pleased with the long delivery of rare winter flowers. Ash calmly asked Siren about the house arrest, while a comfortable silence reigned between them. Siren confidently justified training in the cold sighting endurance and muscle strength. Ash folded his arms thoughtfully, and Siren carefully turned the conversation to his unexpected visit. Siren looked up at Ash in surprise, embarrassed by the hint of a birthday present. Ash reminded Siren of the engagement, with a slight grin, enjoying her confused silence. Siren thoughtfully twirled the cup in her hands, listening to Ash's hints about the upcoming celebratory banquet. Siren slyly offered Ash a new training ground, hoping to escape the cramped estate. Ash covered his lips with his hand and suddenly supported Siren's idea, thinking with a serious expression. Siren froze abruptly on the couch, taken aback by Ash's unexpected agreement and his calm tone. Siren and Ash froze warily at the table, hearing heavy footsteps outside the office door. Ash pulled Siren towards him, sharply shielding her from danger, with a strong movement of his hand. Siren flushed with embarrassment and tried to pull away while Ash held her firmly close. Ash listened warily to the approaching footsteps, not letting go of the confused Siren from his arms. Siren stubbornly pressed her palms against Ash's chest, demanding freedom amid the tense silence of the office. Siren pulled away from Ash in irritation, demanding that he stop treating her like a helpless girl. Ash straightened up calmly at the table, trying to explain his harsh and defensive actions to Siren. Ash held up his palms, looking unperturbed, admitting to his overly quick, instinctive reactions. Serena silently clasped her hands to her chest, hiding her embarrassment behind a cold and stubborn gaze. The silence of the office was broken by Ezra's excited cry, bursting into his sister's room with a frightened face. Siren leaned forward anxiously as Ash watched warily as Ezra burst into the office. Ezra clung tightly to Siren, with trembling hands, hiding his face in her chest out of fear. Siren stroked Ezra's hair in confusion, trying to understand the reason for his sudden panic. Ezra clung to Siren in tears, begging her not to abandon him, in the midst of growing despair. Serena froze in her chair, embarrassed at a loss for words from Ezra and his childish affection. The maid Anna bowed guiltily before Serena, while Ezra quietly hid in her lap. Ezra clung to his sister in fear, afraid of expulsion, and Anna tried to calm him down in confusion. Serena frowned and sharply demanded an explanation from Anna in the midst of the uneasy silence of the office. Anna carefully told Siren about Adriana's recent visit, visibly nervous about what she heard. Adriana screamed furiously at Ezra's door, threatening imminent expulsion and frightening the boy to tears. Serena thought back grimly to Adriana's threats, knowing that letting Ezra go alone was too dangerous now. Siren hugged Ezra gently, trying to calm the trembling boy in the quiet glow of the office. Siren stroked Ezra's hair gently, assuring him of her support and care. Siren smiled warmly at Ezra, promising to stay by his side for as long as he needed. Ezra raised his wet eyes to Siren, clinging to her words with a timid, childish hope. Ezra held Siren's hand tightly, admitting with relief how afraid he had been of losing his sister forever. Serena listened to Ezra with confusion, surprised by his sincere affection and trembling voice. A dark image of the old Ezra, cold and full of hidden hatred, flashed through Serena's mind. Serena thought sadly about how much Ezra had changed after all the events he had experienced. Ash watched his brother and sister silently as Siren slowly turned her gaze to him. Siren gently called Ezra over, deciding to introduce the frightened boy to Ash better. Serena calmly introduced Ash Gravor, while Ezra stood warily near her dress. Ash leaned towards Ezra in a friendly manner, greeting the boy with a warm and calm smile. Ezra hid timidly behind Serena, barely able to squeeze out an awkward greeting in a trembling voice. Ash smiled kindly at Ezra, trying to ease the boy's fear with his gentle and open manner. Siren visibly tensed in front of Ezra, about to confess the important decision with Ash. Ezra looked at Siren and Ash in confusion, while Anna stood anxiously next to the boy. Siren looked down in embarrassment and quietly confessed to Ezra about her imminent engagement to Ash. Ezra stood stunned in front of Serena, trying to comprehend the unexpected news of the engagement. Anna covered her mouth with her hands in fear, shocked by Siren's confession and Ash's calmness. A heavy silence fell over the room as Ezra and Anna looked between them in confusion. Anna sheepishly apologized for her violent reaction, continuing to hide her shock with trembling hands. Anna's memory flashed back to the recent scandal with Siren's hair caused by talk of marriage. Anna clasped her hands warily, watching Ash's overly gentle attitude towards Siren with suspicion. Siren barely hid her smile, realizing how much Anna didn't like the sudden engagement with Ash. Ezra pressed himself anxiously against Siren, trying to make sure that the words he had heard about the wedding were true. Ash leaned confidently towards Ezra, calmly confirming his desire to become his sister's husband. Ash respectfully asked Ezra for consent, while the boy was confused about his future family. Ash calmly explained the terms of the engagement to Ezra as the sunset light bathed the spacious office in gold. Ezra looked at Ash seriously and suddenly asked about his feelings for Siren. Anna and Siren stood tensely behind Ezra, waiting for Ash's answer with noticeable excitement. Ash confidently confessed his love to Siren, and Ezra froze in confusion after hearing his words. Ezra smiled happily, believing Ash, while Siren was suspiciously thinking about his sly answer. Siren looked away tensely, trying to hide her embarrassment after Ash's unexpected confession. Anna beamed enthusiastically next to him, already imagining the secret affair of her mistress with the noble commander. Ezra shook Ash's hand firmly, stubbornly, declaring his love for his beloved older sister. Ezra hovered over Ash with childish seriousness, confidently declaring his feelings for Siren stronger. Anna gently led Ezra out of the office, leaving Siren and Ash alone in the warm silence. Ezra froze at the office door awkwardly, clutching the handle and thinking about the conversation he had overheard between the adults. Ezra turned to Ash cautiously, timidly inquiring about his future life next to Siren. Siren and Ash simultaneously turned their gazes to Ezra, surprised by his unexpected question. Siren frowned in confusion, as Ash calmly left the decision of living together up to her. Ash smiled softly at Siren and respectfully reminded her that this house belonged to both of them. Ezra pressed his finger to his lips thoughtfully, seriously considering Ash and Siren's words. Ezra beamed happily at the office door, childishly delighted to allow Ash to live next to them. Siren looked at Ash with disbelief, accusing him of making too many beautiful promises for a child. Ash just laughed calmly, pleased that he had managed to quickly win Ezra over. Siren looked away in embarrassment, reluctantly admitting that Ash really did have a knack for charming people. Ash smiled confidently at Siren, understanding perfectly well why young Ezra had so quickly admired him. Serena hurried out of the office, hiding her embarrassment under a cold and collected expression. At the carriage, Moana suddenly called out to Sirenu, carefully examining her formal evening dress. Moana asked in surprise about Ezra's disappearance, while Serena calmly explained the rules of admission. Moana mockingly compared Siren to a grumpy grandmother, causing her to awkwardly stand at the carriage. Serena wondered anxiously how strange it would be if Ezra weren't at her engagement party. Serena's memory flashed back to the strict palace rules that forbade children from appearing among high society. The cold image of the queen reminded Serena of her duty to observe etiquette and set an example for society. Serena realized with bitterness how long she had remained a prisoner of strict palace rules and habits. Siren sharply ordered Ezra back, gratefully remembering Moana's words at the brightly lit carriage. Moana gently calmed Siren down after the fuss, trying to change the conversation to a lighter topic. Moana looked at Siren's black dress in surprise as she calmly adjusted her lace collar. Siren made a restrained reminder about the morning, and Moana threw up her hands in displeasure at her stubbornness. Moana puffed out her cheeks indignantly, not understanding why Siren had chosen such a gloomy outfit. Moana cheerfully whispered in Siren's ear about the engagement and birthday offering at least a little bit of bright colors. Serena stopped coldly in the middle of the hall, noticing the sudden appearance of her hot-tempered cousin. Siren's cousin stepped forward defiantly in a luxurious scarlet dress, her irritated gaze flashing. Moana nervously covered her mouth with her hand, while Siren sarcastically reminded her of her cousin's distant kinship. The cousin suddenly flared up with anger and began to reproach Siren for wearing mourning clothes at the festival. Serena remained unperturbed in the noisy hall, meeting her cousin's attacks with icy calm. Adriana quipped at Serena about mourning while she calmly explained her invitation to the reception. Adriana laughed loudly and began to mock Serena, calling her too naive and simple. Moana clenched her hands in irritation as Serena prepared a cold response to Adriana's new barbs. Adriana suddenly fell silent, struck by Siren's calm and unexpectedly harsh reaction. Serena reminded Adriana, with icy disdain, about the guests who showed up at the party without an invitation. Adriana hovered over Serena angrily, trying to intimidate her with threats and her father's name. Serena coldly rebuked Adriana, sarcastically, reminding her of her age and her impudent behavior. Adriana flushed with anger and swung her sword sharply, while Siren remained icy calm. Moana clapped her hands in delight, amazed at how confidently Siren had put Adriana in her place. Siren turned sharply at the familiar voice when Ash suddenly appeared next to her. Ash appeared in a luxurious blue uniform, instantly attracting the guests' attention with his confident and calm smile. Ash greeted Siren gallantly, while Moana froze in shock after the unexpected affectionate nickname. Moana beamed excitedly next to Siren, teasing her with her cute new name in front of Ash. Ash admitted with a slight grin that he had no intention of sharing Siren's affectionate nickname with others. Ash slowly opened the velvet box, revealing a sparkling engagement ring with a stone to Siren. Ash carefully placed the ring on Siren's finger, apologizing for the gem's rather modest size. Siren looked at the ring in confusion, while Ash calmly admired how perfectly it fit. Siren pressed her hand to her chest in embarrassment, amazed at how Ash had guessed the size of the decoration. Ash confidently extended his hand to Siren, offering to go out to the guests together and announce their engagement. Serena thought anxiously about Ezra, while everyone around her was already beginning to discuss their unexpected appearance apart. Siren calmly explained Ezra's delay to Ash, trying not to violate the strict rules of palace etiquette. Ash confidently suggested they wait a bit, while Moana watched their conversation closely from the side. Moana barely hid her satisfied smile as she noticed how quickly Serene and Ash had become closer. Moana waved cheerfully to Siren and hurried inside the palace, leaving them alone on the terrace. Ash stopped seriously next to Siren, about to tell her something important before the announcement. Ash spoke seriously to Serena about an important secret that she should know before the engagement. Siren clenched her fingers in worry, admitting that her father was capable of demanding the impossible for the sake of profit. Siren looked up at Ash in confusion, shocked that he already knew of her uncle's intentions. Ash calmly reminded Siren that her father was far from the only dangerous man among the influential nobility. Siren froze tensely, trying to hide her anxiety after Ash's unexpectedly serious words. Siren's memory flashed to the young Ash, who had become a duke early and had experienced the cruelty of his own family. Siren breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that she was no longer afraid with Ash around. The guests in the hall had already begun to whisper about the appearance of Ash Graver, next to the mysterious Lady Hunter. Marquis Hunter suddenly froze with a glass in his hand, hearing his daughter's familiar surname among the guests. The Marquis turned tensely around the hall, trying to understand the reason for the sudden noise around Siren. Ash confidently led Siren through the crowd of guests, while Ezra quickly followed behind them. Adriana stared in shock at Siren next to Ash, while the Marquis frowned darkly in anger. The Marquis asked Adriana's words, incredulously shocked by the rumors about the Duke's appearance next to Serena. Marquis Hunter furiously attacked Adriana, demanding an explanation for her words about the Duke and Serene. Adriana frightenedly made excuses to her father, trying to hide her own lies and confusion. Ash walked confidently towards the guests, instantly attracting the attention of the hall. With a calm and commanding smile, Ash gallantly thanked the assembled guests, while Siren stood tensely nearby among the crowd. Ash firmly announced his engagement to Serena Hunter, causing the hall to freeze in shock. After the announcement of the engagement, the hall exploded with shock and whispers, and Adriana and Marquis Hunter were left in complete stupor. Ash publicly explained that Siren's grave condition after mourning was the reason for their hasty decision to be together. He confidently put his arm around Siren's shoulder, showing those around him the closeness and seriousness of his intentions. Marquis Hunter and Adriana couldn't believe what was happening and looked as if the whole situation was collapsing before their eyes. One of the guests loudly congratulated the couple on their engagement, finally turning the news into an officially recognized event among the nobility. The young lord clapped his hands joyfully, and the golden light of the hall made Ash's smile even brighter. The guests warmly welcomed the couple, Siren and Ash, admiring their support amidst the harsh rumors. Adriana clutched her dress in confusion as Marquis Hunter looked gloomily after Ash and Siren. The Marquis drained his glass in one gulp, and the thick wine trembled in the glass, along with his rage. He rudely reproached Adriana, reminding her of the knightly order and unfulfilled expectations. Adriana flushed with anger, and the flickering candles illuminated her argument with her angry father. The Marquis clenched his teeth over his glass, dreaming of acquiring the Hunter title after the death of his eldest son. Siren stood next to Ash in the glittering hall as the guests enthusiastically congratulated the couple. Marquis Hunter angrily covered his mouth with his hand, and his heavy gaze froze on the engaged couple. The Marquis walked across the patterned carpet with a gloomy face, determined to regain control of the situation. Ash and Siren greeted Hunter calmly, maintaining a cool confidence in front of the ball guests. The Marquis sharply reminded him of the rules of the palace, and the golden stairs behind him increased the tension. Siren covered her nose from the smell of wine, as Ash gave a cold shoulder to the irritated Marquis Hunter. The Marquis loudly demanded that the palace rules be respected and that he be recognized as the main guardian of Serena. Ash calmly corrected Hunter, reminding him that a completely different person was considered Siren's protector. The Marquis's face twitched with confusion when the conversation turned to the deceased Earl Hunter. Ash confidently recalled that the engagement issue was decided during the lifetime of the current head of the family. The guests were already whispering about the imminent engagement, and new rumors were slowly spreading through the hall. Serena clasped her hand to her chest in confusion when she heard the words about the secret permission for the engagement. Siren's violet eyes flashed with alarm as her thoughts raced around the strange statement. Marcus Hunter paced the carpet nervously, assuring Ash of the late Earl's consent to the alliance. The Marquise's face lengthened with fear when the conversation turned to the actual request for engagement. Ash confidently hugged Siren, and the golden light of the hall softly slid over their clothes. With a smile, Ash admitted that he had asked Count Hunter many times to allow him to marry Siren. Marquis Hunter stood frozen in the middle of the hall, confused, while the guests began to exchange anxious glances. Serena calmly raised her head and asked her father directly about his dissatisfaction with Duke Greyward. The crowd became more noisy, and Hunter quickly began to deny his earlier words about the engagement. Adriana flushed with indignation, reminding the hall of Siren's recent mourning after the funeral. Amid the whispers of the guests, Manhwa Hunter tried to accuse Ash of getting engaged too quickly. Heavy rumors began to spread behind the nobility, and discussions of mourning quickly spread throughout the hall. Siren's head dropped under the pressure of the crowd as Ash tightened his grip on her shaking shoulders. Ash frowned next to Siren, her quiet guilt only adding to the gloomy tension of the ball. Adriana theatrically covered her eyes with her hand, feigning pity for the confused Marcus Hunter. Ezra stepped forward sharply under the golden light of the chandeliers and loudly declared his support. Siren and Ash turned to Ezra in surprise as the guests hushed tensely around the carpet. Ezra clenched his fists to his chest and spoke honestly about how Ash had supported Siren after her loss. Ash gently ruffled Ezra's hair, and the boy looked up shyly, his blue eyes shining. Ash praised Ezra with a slight smile and confidently ran his hand through his golden hair. Under the gaze of the guests, Ash calmly stated the Hunter family's consent and Ezra's support. Ash confidently extended his hand forward and took the blame protecting Siren in front of the hall. Serena froze among the golden glow of the chandeliers, pressing her palm tightly to the black lace of her dress. Serena quietly explained to the guests the choice of mourning attire and respect for the memory of her parents. Adriana clutched the pendant on her chest nervously as the noisy room grew increasingly excited about the couple's engagement. The guests smiled as they discussed Ash's concern for Siren, while Adriana looked gloomily lost in the crowd. Adriana hid her irritation behind a dark fan, remembering her own words about Siren's mourning. Adriana raised her head sharply when the guests' conversations began to turn against her. Adriana stood frozen at the stairs amid the whispers of the nobles, while the guests recalled her light outfit at the funeral. Adriana tugged nervously at her lace glove as the guests' gossip struck at her pride. Siren walked calmly next to Ash, while Adriana's thoughts were confused among other people's conversations. Uncle Hunter, who had turned pale, quickly agreed to check everything, wiping away the sweat with a trembling palm. Uncle quickly disappeared among the guests, and Siren and Ash remained under the surprised whispers of the hall. The sumptuous banquet was once again filled with music and conversation as the nobles forgot the recent scandal. Ash and Siren stood calmly among the guests as the golden hall slowly quieted down after the scandal. Siren looked at Ash with confusion after hearing about the petition left in her uncle's office. The light from the chandeliers flickered across Siren's surprised face as Ash confessed to the letter he had secretly left behind. Against the backdrop of delicate flowers, Ash calmly recalled the engagement request he had submitted earlier. Siren flushed with indignation and grabbed Ash tightly by the sleeve in the middle of the noisy hall. Ash closed his eyes thoughtfully, choosing his words amid the soft hum of the luxurious evening hall. Ezra happily held his glass next to the guests, while Anna smiled warmly at his happy appearance. Siren hugged Ezra tightly, remembering Ash's arrival and the rapid changes of the last few days. Ash compared himself to his brother with a slight smile, and Siren carefully studied his facial features. Serena touched her lips thoughtfully, reflecting on the similarities between the Hunter family under the glow of the palace. Siren recalled the ancient Hunter family as the warm light of the library illuminated the family portrait. Ash listened attentively to the story of the purple eyes of the clan remaining calm amidst the noise of the guests. Serena spoke confidently of the Hunter family's gift, and Ezra's name sounded especially warm. Anna smiled and praised Ezra for his tenacity, while the boy sheepishly tugged at the hem of his waistcoat. Siren quietly wished the brothers strength, admiring Ash under the golden glow of the huge hall. Siren thoughtfully touched her chin and admitted that she dreamed only of the strength of a true knight. Siren held tightly to Ezra, dreaming of becoming stronger to protect her family. Among the precious chains in the ancient chest, Siren recalled the fear of losing loved ones. Ash spoke softly to Sirene. As the golden light of the palace shimmered on his uniform, Siren looked up sharply, surprised by Ash's unexpected offer of help. Ash confidently promised to help Siren become a strong knight and achieve true mastery. Ash leaned slightly towards Siren and offered her private sword lessons. Ash bowed respectfully before Siren and reminded her of the bride's right to special privileges. Siren stood there confused amidst the white patterns and light hearing about sword training. Siren looked away from Ash, not wanting to spend too much time near him. Ash touched his chin thoughtfully and calmly recalled Siren's unusual way of holding her sword. Siren clenched her fist sharply when Ash, with a smile, suggested that they start training tomorrow. Siren looked up at Ash with confidence and declared her desire to surpass his legendary record. Ash raised an eyebrow in surprise, looking closely at the serious face of the determined Siren. Under the glow of the dark blue patterns, Ash's path to the title of Great Swordmaster was recalled. Serena held the blade tightly mentally, counting down the remaining year until she came of age. Ash extended his hand approvingly to Sirene, accepting her bold promise to become the strongest knight. Siren silently looked at Ash's outstretched palm, remembering all the encounters after returning to the past. Under the soft glow of the hall, Siren carefully touched Ash's hand, choosing the path to new strength. In the shining hall, Ash confidently held Siren's palm, promising to help her become stronger with the sword. Ash smiled softly at Siren among the golden patterns of the palace, hiding his excitement for the training to come. Siren raised her chin and firmly accepted Ash's offer, not wanting to betray his trust. In the academy courtyard, the young knights bowed low to Siren, greeting her with sincere respect. Siren stood frozen in confusion in front of the line of students, not expecting such a respectful greeting. The cadets warmly thanked Siren for saving them in battle, looking at her with genuine admiration. Serena looked down at the cadets in embarrassment, not accustomed to sincere gratitude and warmth. Under the clear sky, the cadets joyfully surrounded Siren, admiring her courage in the recent battle. The purple-haired girl confidently wished Siren success, acknowledging her strength and rapid growth. Siren waved warmly to the cadets, and the academy courtyard filled with light laughter and smiles. Serena quickly approached Moana on the stone plaza, trying to hide her embarrassment after the meeting. Moana listened carefully to Siren as she spoke haltingly about the young knight's gratitude. Siren and Moana walked slowly through the bright courtyard of the academy, discussing their uncle's unexpected behavior. Moana stopped in surprise when she heard about the noisy construction going on at the Hunter family estate. Workers lugged heavy boxes around the yard while repairing Siren's training ground. Siren thoughtfully adjusted her glove, not expecting such an expensive and personal gift from Ash. Moana laughed quietly next to Siren as she spoke sheepishly about the overly generous attention. Moana's mischievous smile widened when she heard that Ash would soon be leaving the estate again. Moana slyly pulled Siren closer, pressing her for details about her strange dissatisfaction with Ash. Serena reluctantly admitted to Moana that Ash had been training her in swordsmanship even during her arrest. In the spacious hall, Ash calmly trained Siren and Ezra, swinging a long training sword. Moana sighed in disappointment, and Siren thoughtfully recalled the unusual lessons of the swordmaster. Siren swiftly delivered chopping blows with her blade, confidently moving across the stone floor of the hall. Moana stretched lazily as she walked, while Siren discussed the simple basics of Ash's swordplay. Moana's mischievous smile widened as she hinted at the commander's special regard for Siren. Siren turned around sharply in the middle of the street, looking at Moana in surprise after her loud hint. Moana slyly reminded Siren of Ash's confession, and she stubbornly tried to hide her embarrassed heart. Siren stood there in the middle of the street, confused, wondering about Ash's strange secrecy and actions. A cold wind swirled over the academy as Siren tried to understand Ash Greyward's true feelings. Moana happily nudged Siren forward, eager to get her back to the bustling life of the academy. The girls entered the training ground, where the cadets with swords immediately turned in their direction. Siren stood tensely at the academy's platform, catching the curious glances of the young knights. The cadets applauded Siren unanimously, welcoming her return with noisy voices and sincere smiles. Moana winked playfully at the confused Siren, enjoying her confusion among the noisy crowd of cadets. The two girls walked confidently across the academy courtyard, while the knights continued their animated conversations around them. The dark-haired cadet watched the applause, with a frown remembering the dangerous operation and Siren's participation in the battle. The fair-haired youth rubbed his chin thoughtfully, acknowledging Siren's strength and her assistance to the night squad. The cadets argued heatedly around the arena, discussing Siren's victory and the power of her swift strikes. The blonde-haired boy frowned, hiding his worry after the bold hint about Siren's skill. Knights quickly gathered around the training grounds, noisily speculating about Siren's future at the academy. Siren furiously cut through the air with her blade, silver sparks erupting around her armor. The cadet thoughtfully pressed his hand to his chin, admitting that Siren was worthy of a much higher rank. The cadet stood frozen in confusion in the middle of the courtyard when the bold suggestion about the 8th detachment was made. The guy suddenly jumped up from his seat irritably, throwing barbed words at his opponents amid the noise of training. The knights looked at each other anxiously, discussing the possible transfer of Siren and the upcoming distribution of places. Serena smiled calmly at the girls, while someone's dangerous and envious plan was already being born nearby. The light from the lanterns flickered over the papers, and Siren was determined to break into the 8th division. Serena crossed the warm hall of the mansion, with quick steps clinging tightly to the hope of saving her home. The blonde curls trembled around Siren's face as disturbing thoughts swirled heavily in her head. On the wide staircase, a servant respectfully stopped Serena, breaking the echoing silence of the spacious estate. Siren's violet eyes suddenly flashed with alarm as soon as the conversation turned to the annoying uncle. The girl closed her eyes tiredly, irritably remembering another unexpected visit from her persistent relative. The servant bowed sheepishly before Serena, while a loud cry was already heard from the far corridor. Siren's uncle laughed loudly in the shining hall, confidently spreading his arms in front of the surprised servants. Serena stood frozen on the stairs while her relative spoke sweetly of the long-awaited meeting. The man irritably extended his palm again, talking about the late count's office and old papers. The servants exchanged tense glances as the uncle angrily complained about being forbidden to approach the master's office. Sunlight flooded the tall windows, and Siren firmly reminded him of the strict orders for the estate's security. Uncle abruptly lowered his gaze, trying to hide his anxiety after talking about the engagement and family accounts. Serena looked coldly at her uncle, reminding him of his duty as a guardian and the dire situation of the Hunter household. The girl confidently descended the stairs, ordering the servants to immediately escort the irritated relative out. Uncle chuckled discontentedly at the exit, while heavy footsteps echoed throughout the huge mansion. Serena clenched her hand in anxiety, feeling the important day slowly slipping out of control. In the spacious hall, Ash calmly gave orders to the servants, carefully preparing the estate for the queen's arrival. The assistant quickly reported to Ash, while servants and guards moved noisily around. Ash looked down at the papers, thoughtfully checking the final preparations before the important royal meeting. Serena sat thoughtfully in the semi-darkness of the living room, anxiously thinking about marriage and the future queen. The girl quietly turned to Ash, asking him to strengthen the estate's security before the arrival of the distinguished guest. Siren's violet eyes flickered with worry as a heavy premonition gripped her heart. Ash confidently gave orders to the guards, demanding a flawless check of weapons and security around the queen. The dark hallway of the mansion echoed with footsteps as one of the knights quickly called out to Ash. The green-eyed youth calmly entered the hall, informing Ash of the long-awaited arrival of Her Majesty. The golden carriage slowly entered the courtyard as the knights lined up tensely along the wide square. The queen stepped smoothly out of the carriage, receiving a respectful bow from Ash at the front steps of the estate. The blonde ruler spoke softly to Ash, apologizing for the unexpected disturbances surrounding the visit. Ash bowed his head calmly, emphasizing the honor of the knightly order to accompany such an important guest. The red-haired knight straightened up abruptly, barely noticing the queen's movement in the morning courtyard. Lauren Phillips greeted the queen confidently, her long scarlet ponytail fluttering in the winter wind. A cold sky shone above the palace towers as the knights solemnly took their places near the queen's carriage. The queen, dressed in a green dress, walked slowly across the courtyard, surrounded by knights and the attentive gaze of her attendants. Ash calmly ordered that Her Majesty be escorted to the training grounds for the upcoming exhibition match. The fair-haired knight awkwardly admitted that he had almost made a mistake due to the unusual composition of the royal escort. Lauren explained that the queen feels safer around female knights and avoids extra men. The queen looked away thoughtfully, confirming that she was indeed more comfortable surrounded by female warriors. In the arena, Lauren respectfully offered the queen to participate in at least a few training fights. The blonde ruler smiled softly, agreeing to just 1 or 2 friendly duels. The queen politely agreed to take part in the training duels, which visibly pleased the surrounding knights. One of Ash's subordinates brought him a special weapon for training battles and respectfully handed it over to his commander. Ash handed the training sword to the queen, intending to personally prepare her for the duel. At that moment, the queen suddenly tensed up and froze as if she had been frightened or shocked by something that was happening. Lauren immediately noticed the strange reaction and carefully asked if everything was okay with Her Majesty. The queen quickly pulled herself together and with a forced smile assured everyone that nothing serious had happened. She apologized for thinking for a moment, after which the atmosphere became calm again, although the worry on her face did not completely disappear. The queen carefully examined the training sword and noted that the weapon was in perfect condition. Ash watched her and noticed that her reaction was becoming more and more strange and disturbing. It seemed to him as if the sword itself was somehow testing or checking the queen. A memory flashed through Ash's mind of another girl who had once reacted in exactly the same way to a weapon. He realized that the resemblance between the current queen and Serene was too great to be a mere coincidence. The queen also looked shocked, as if there was some hidden connection between her, the sword, and Ash. He felt the tension building and began to wonder what exactly united their destinies and why the weapon caused such a strong reaction. One of the knights urgently called Ash over and asked him to spare a minute for an important report. Ash stepped aside and calmly asked what exactly had happened during the preparation for the event. A subordinate reported that a serious malfunction was discovered during an inspection of the knight's equipment related to the queen's safety. At the same time, Moana noticed the absence of one of the girls and wondered whether she should go looking for her. The situation was gradually becoming more and more tense because the promotion exam was about to begin. Ash turned sharply to Moana and asked why she was alone and where Reina was. Moana looked up in surprise, realizing that the situation could be much more dangerous than it initially seemed. Ash stopped abruptly in the middle of the hall when the knight quietly reported that Siren had been missing for almost an hour. The knights surrounded Siren and explained haltingly that she had gone to check on the queen's carriage, which was behaving strangely. Serena quickly disappeared into the dark corridor, promising to return quickly after a short check of the crew. Moana clutched her glove to her chest, nervously scolding herself for trusting the knights who had delivered the disturbing news. Ash stood frozen in the dim light of the palace, his face heavy, and the air around him became uneasy and cold. Siren tugged furiously at the heavy warehouse door, loud bangs echoing throughout the cramped space. The girl wearily sank to her knees among the old barrels and dirty floor, quietly cursing the enemy's trap. Serena quickly realized that she had been tricked into going inside and then locked in with no chance of getting out. She looked up at the small windows under the ceiling, but the narrow openings did not allow her to get out. The damp, moldy smell and the gloomy darkness reminded Serene of the difficult days of her previous imprisonment in the dungeon. The girl slapped herself sharply on the cheeks and forced her trembling thoughts to give way to cold calculation. Siren gritted her teeth, determined to get out of here at any cost and make it to the nightly exam. Serena paced nervously around the cramped warehouse, knowing she needed to get out before the commotion started. The girl remembered Moana next to the knights and grabbed on to the hope that her friend was already looking for her at the academy. Suddenly, before Serene's eyes, Ash's calm face in a white cloak appeared among the golden light of the palace. She bit her glove, sharply irritated by the thoughts of Ash that only prevented her from collecting herself and thinking. Serena tiredly covered her eyes with her palms, forcing herself to forget her worries and seek salvation on her own. Siren quickly scanned the dusty warehouse and stopped her gaze on an old mop near the heavy door. The girl gripped the shaft tightly in her palms, determined to knock out the lock by force and break out at any cost. A memory of Ash patiently correcting her stance during her wooden sword training flashed through Siren's mind. She stood in front of the door, confidently grabbed the mop, and prepared to hit it right on the lock. Siren's purple eyes narrowed, remembering Ash's instructions about the correct angle of impact and the strength of her arms. The girl abruptly jerked the shaft downwards, putting all her body weight into a powerful blow to the old warehouse door. Ash stopped near the closed warehouse and frowned, realizing that Siren had been missing for too long. The commander calmly ordered Moana to reschedule Serene's exam, leaving the girl one last chance to make it on time. Ash clutched the documents in his hand and quickly connected Siren's disappearance with the suspicious story about the horse. The two knights exchanged lazy glances at the warehouse door, deciding that the captive inside had long since given up. The men chuckled contentedly and began talking about rest, confident that their plan was going smoothly. One of the knights turned sharply at the steps when a tall silhouette in a white cloak appeared next to the door. Ash looked coldly at the men under the bright sky of the courtyard, demanding to know where Siren was now. The knights turned pale near the warehouse, looking at each other in fear after Ash appeared next to the heavy door. One of the men gave a forced laugh and tried to hide his trembling, pretending that nothing had happened. A broom handle flew out from inside the door, striking the knight hard in the frightened face. The man recoiled with a scream, while the others stared in shock at the broken wooden door of the warehouse. Through the narrow crack, Siren's bright purple eye appeared full of anger and stubborn determination. The knights stood confused near the door, while Ash calmly watched what was happening in complete silence. Ash smiled softly at Siren among the bright patterns of the courtyard and conveyed that Moana was very worried about her. Siren suddenly remembered the exam and looked around in confusion, while the frightened knights stood silently nearby. Ash calmly walked closer and ordered the key to be returned, assuring Siren that there was still enough time before the test. The girl furiously grabbed one of the knights by the collar, venting her anger at the humiliating confinement in the warehouse. Ash gently stopped Siren and coldly suggested that they leave the matter for later, right before the exam. The knights paled even more when Ash calmly stated that he remembered each of the culprits perfectly well. Siren quickly stood up straight next to Ash and walked firmly towards the arena, preparing to take the important test. Ash turned silently to the frightened knights, and his cold gaze immediately made the men turn even paler. Siren quickly disappeared into the distance of the courtyard, while the knights breathed a sigh of relief, rejoicing at their chance salvation. The men hunched over tiredly near the warehouse, nervously whispering about how they had almost been caught by the order's commander. One of the knights stared in fear at the broken door, not believing that Siren could do such a thing with a mop. He carefully touched the smooth break in the wood, noticing the too smooth mark around the broken lock. The knight looked up sharply, remembering the glow of sword energy that he had only seen before during training. The end of the exam was announced in the training arena, and the tired knights began to slowly disperse throughout the academy. Serena listened calmly to the results, trying to hide her anxiety under a cold and even expression. The girl dropped heavily to one knee in the middle of the court, relieved to know that she had made it to the test on time. Moana quickly approached Siren and supported her friend, gently praising her for her perseverance and endurance during the exam. Serena remembered the dark warehouse and admitted to Moana that her body still ached with fatigue after the escape. The girl smiled gratefully at Moana, learning that it was her friend who had managed to get her exam postponed by command. Moana hugged Siren tightly, with a slight smile, reminding her who she owed her salvation to. Ash stood nearby, under the warm light of the arena, while Siren's thoughts became more and more confused with each passing second. Serena quietly called out to the commander, awkwardly clutching the sleeve of her uniform and trying to find the right words. Ash turned around calmly and sternly, and Siren immediately lost all her previous confidence in front of him. The girl thanked Ash shyly for his help, looking away and hiding her trembling behind a forced smile. Siren stood frozen in the middle of the arena, confused, until Ash's words made her look up in embarrassment. Ash calmly praised Siren for her strength and endurance, and the girl sheepishly asked him to repeat what he had said. The knights at the broken door turned pale as Siren admitted that she had escaped the trap too quickly. The girl awkwardly showed the old mop, causing even the stern knights to look at each other in confusion. Serena thoughtfully covered her lips with her hand, trying to understand where she got such strength from. Ash chuckled softly under the golden light of the arena, watching the confused Siren with interest. Siren stood frozen in the middle of the bright arena, trying to understand why Ash was looking at her with such interest. Ash could barely contain his laughter, as a confused Siren scowled next to him under the knight's gazes. The commander said with a grin that Siren was the first in history to use a mop instead of a real sword. Ash warmly congratulated the girl on her success, and Siren sheepishly reminded her about the ordinary wooden mop. Siren listened attentively to Ash's explanation of the power of mana, pressing her palm tighter to her chest in excitement. Under the flashes of purple energy, Ash demonstrated the power of the sword, confidently controlling the streams of bright mana. Purple streams of mana swirled around the mage, as Ash explained to Siren the nature of the powers of swordsmen and mages. Ash spoke leisurely about the training that allowed swordsmen to accumulate mana within their bodies. Dark energy slid smoothly along Ash's blade, illuminating the spacious hall with a soft purple glow. Ash raised the heavy shield of mana, showing Siren how the defense could withstand powerful blows from opponents. Siren's eyes widened in surprise as she listened intently to Ash's explanation of the power of energy shields. Siren held the broken mop by the broken door in confusion as Ash calmly asked her questions. Hearing the price of the metals for the sword energy, Siren flushed with horror and comically cowered in front of Ash. The girl covered her face with her palms, embarrassedly remembering that her first sword power was an ordinary mop. Emerald energy enveloped the night as Ash told Siren about the rare awakening of hidden mana. In a bright glow of mana, the knight held the wounded girl close to him, balancing on the brink of complete despair. Ash gently explained to Siren the value of her power, and the girl listened thoughtfully under the warm light of the arena. Siren's shoulders slumped wearily, remembering the mop, the exam, and the wasted mana under the bright sky of the arena. Ash looked at Siren with quiet regret, realizing that her strength would have been enough for the first division. Siren looked away shyly as the golden light of the hall fell softly on her disheveled hair. Ash calmly changed the subject, asking Siren about her sparring with the strong Abi. Ash's expression grew serious as he admitted that after the report, he immediately went to look for Siren. In the spacious hall, the knights quietly discussed the queen's health while the torchlight flickered near the marble steps. Ash calmly held the documents, reporting on the inspection of weapons and equipment after the anxious examination. Siren's gaze suddenly snapped up to the cracked sword, her violet eyes flashing with worry and fear. Ash explained grimly that without testing, a faulty blade could lead the arena to dire disaster. Siren covered her lips with her hand, recalling the rumors of accidents and the queen who died from her wounds. The bright hall darkened for Siren as the thought of coincidences began to form a disturbing picture. Ash spoke sullenly about the assassination attempt on the queen, while the warm light of the palace fell on his stern profile. Siren clutched the uniform to her chest in confusion, seeing no reason for anyone to benefit from the queen's death. The bloody sword and the talk about the prince increased the anxiety, and the atmosphere around became heavy and gloomy. Before Siren's eyes appeared a mad king with a dagger who had dreamed for years of getting rid of the queen. Hearing that the queen had just left the palace, Serena turned suddenly pale and rushed towards the exit. Ash followed Siren through the spacious hall, his footsteps echoing on the stone floor. Siren ran along the stone corridor of the palace, clenching her fists and thinking only about saving the queen. Ash caught up with Siren at the arch and anxiously asked why she was so sure of the impending disaster. Siren turned around sharply, her violet eyes flickering with heavy thoughts and hidden fear. In the middle of the empty courtyard, Siren tried to explain herself haltingly, while Ash held her hand tightly. Under the vaults of the old palace, Siren clutched her head, certain that the queen was now in danger. Ash exhaled heavily and agreed to help, deciding to listen to Siren's explanations on the way. The royal carriage sped along the evening road, while the scarlet sun painted the sky with thick golden reflections. The fair-haired knight turned around warily, noticing his comrade riding a dark horse among the guards. A cry of pain tore through the air, and blood spattered onto the knight's uniform, causing everyone to freeze abruptly. The girl pulled sharply on the reins and shouted a warning instantly, realizing that this was a planned ambush. An alarming order to protect the queen swept over the road, and the riders rushed towards the carriage through the chaos. Lauren yanked the carriage door open as the evening air shook with the sounds of shouts and the clash of weapons outside. Lauren's blue eyes widened in alarm, and a bead of sweat appeared on her temple from the growing danger. Inside the carriage, the maid collapsed limply at the queen's feet, an arrow sticking out of her back. Lauren grabbed the queen's hand tightly and pulled her towards the exit, demanding that she run away from here immediately. Against the backdrop of a crimson sunset, Lauren mounted her horse alongside the queen, preparing to break through the ambush. The fair-haired knight fought back furiously in the forest ambush, cursing the queen's unknown enemies. Amidst the dusty road, the knight suddenly became wary, noticing horsemen rapidly approaching in the distance. Siren rode her horse after Ash, the wind blowing through her short hair under the golden sunset. Ash turned his horse sharply and shouted a warning, noticing the danger right behind Lauren. Lauren turned around in the saddle, too late, as an arrow was already flying towards her from the darkness. A sharp arrow pierced Lauren's hand, and scarlet blood splashed onto the royal dress amid the rush. Lauren clenched her teeth in pain, holding the reins with trembling hands, and trying not to fall off the horse. Siren screamed Lauren's name sharply as alarm flashed in her violet eyes amidst the forest chase. Ash raced after Siren, trying to figure out why she had charged forward again without warning. Ash's face grew tense, and his voice was tinged with irritation at Sirene's stubborn recklessness. At full gallop, Ash deflected the arrow, with a powerful swing of his sword, cutting the evening air with a silver arc. Under the scarlet sky of the road, Ash grimly promised Sirene that this time the punishment would be more severe. Lauren, clutching her wounded shoulder, ordered Sirene to immediately take the queen away from the ambush. Despite the pain, Lauren drew her sword and stayed behind, intending to hold off her pursuers alone. Feeling the queen's trembling, Sirene realized that Her Majesty was in severe shock after the attack. Sirene closely monitored the queen's condition and tried to calm her down as they rushed through the forest. Siren held the queen tightly and promised that she would protect Her Majesty at any cost. While they were escaping, Lauren ordered Sirene to follow her and immediately take the queen further into the forest. Hearing the command, "Drive," Sirene spurred her horse, and she and the queen raced forward along the forest road. Lauren remained behind, drew his sword, and turned his horse to face his pursuers, preparing to stop them. The attackers continued to chase them through the forest, but Lauren abruptly blocked their path, forcing them to stop. With cold calm, Lauren warned the enemy that their plan had failed, and they had better retreat, while there was still a chance to save themselves. Lauren coldly warned the attackers that only those who did not value their own lives were allowed to approach. Seeing that Siren and the queen were moving further and further away, the assassins turned their horses and rushed in pursuit of them. Serena, looking back, decided that they had managed to escape their pursuers for a short time. She tried to calm the queen and suggested that she return to the palace as soon as possible with the other knights. However, the queen abruptly refused to return, as if she was worried about something much more serious than the attack itself. The queen, in a panic, asked Sirene not to return her to the royal palace under any circumstances. Trembling with fear, she begged to be taken to any other place where she would be safe and no one could find her. Hearing this, Sirene seriously considered for the first time that the real danger might be hidden inside the palace. Sirena cautiously suggested that not only the queen, but also the king himself might be involved in what was happening. When Sirena spoke of His Majesty, the queen visibly paled and nervously asked if the king had really given his consent to such a thing. Realizing the meaning of her own words, the queen covered her mouth with her hand in horror, as if she had accidentally revealed a terrible secret. While they were hiding in the forest, Sirene cautiously asked the queen if she knew who had organized the assassination attempt. The queen was silent for a long time, and clearly could not bring herself to speak the answer out loud, as if she was afraid of her own thoughts. Noticing her condition, Serena tried to calm the queen and said that the situation now seemed calmer. For safety's sake, Siren asked Her Majesty not to dismount from her horse for now and to remain on guard. Remembering the words about the king, Siren began to think, if the king really was not involved in the attack, then someone else was behind the conspiracy. The more Siren thought about it, the more convinced she became that the queen already suspected a specific person, but was afraid to name him. Ash rode up to the queen in the crimson sunset and anxiously checked to see if the attack had affected her. The pale queen sat up straight in her saddle and thanked Ash for saving her from the bloody ambush. Lauren, with his hand bandaged, reported sullenly that some of the killers had died and the rest had disappeared into the forest. Golden light glided through the trees as the queen gave urgent orders to take refuge in the knightly order. Ash leaned over to the tired Sirene, looking at her trembling shoulders. After the wild ride, Sirene lowered her head against the saddle and admitted that her earlier conclusions about the attack were wrong. Ash stood frozen in the warm sunset light as Sirene suddenly spoke of the misdeed. Serena pressed her palm to her chest and quietly admitted that she had acted without orders or permission. The golden road was bathed in the evening glow as Sirene bowed before Ash in apology. Ash looked at her silently among the white reflections of the sunset, holding back his anxiety and heavy thoughts. Ash frowned under the golden glow of the sunset and chided Sirene for her risky move forward. Sirene pressed her hand to her chest in confusion as the scarlet flowers trembled behind her blonde hair. Ash looked away, covering his lips with a glove, trying to hide his embarrassment after the harsh words. A warm wind swayed the bright sparks around her as Sirene tensely awaited the commander's decision. Ash's cheeks flushed as he tiredly covered his face with his hand and softened his tone in the soft glow of the sunset. Ash forgave Sirene, demanding that she not rush into danger again. Serena rushed across the stone courtyard towards Moana, happily escaping the harsh punishment. Ash watched from a distance, with a slight smile as the girls argued loudly in the warm evening light. A sly Dennis appeared next to Ash and mocked him with a grin for caring about Sirene. At the palace, servants surrounded the luxurious carriage, while the knightly order strengthened its security after the attack. The queen sat among the healers in a golden cloak, and the news of Lauren's serious injury darkened the hall. Ash sternly ordered not to make any noise for now, hoping to calmly report everything to the queen. The queen in the golden cloak warmly thanked Siren for her courage and rescue during the ambush. Siren bowed her head respectfully to the queen, while the knights stood silently behind her. The warm evening light illuminated the courtyard as the queen extended her hand to Siren with words of gratitude. Serena gently squeezed the queen's hand and modestly replied that she was simply doing her duty. The queen looked at the girl with genuine warmth, deciding to thank not only Siren. Knights lined up behind Siren as the queen thanked everyone who protected her that day. The queen promised to reward the knights generously, and the court was instantly filled with joyful noise. The soldiers' cheers rose above the carriage as Siren smiled shyly next to the queen. The knights mockingly taunted the wounded Lauren on the stretcher as the medics hurriedly carried her away. Serena watched the procession with a soft gaze, hiding her quiet relief after a hard day. At the steps of the palace, the girl sadly admitted that she had not had time to bow to the queen in person. Siren's purple eyes widened sharply as she heard something unexpected among the noise. The queen clenched her trembling fingers under her heavy cloak, hiding her fresh wounds. In front of Serene, the queen exhaled heavily, trying to remain calm amidst the bustle of the palace. The golden cloak swayed gently as the queen said a short farewell and headed towards the carriage. Serena watched for a long time as the carriage retreated, bathed in the soft light of the evening courtyard. Left alone, the girl pressed her palm to her chest, struggling to cope with heavy thoughts. Ash slowly approached Siren in the empty courtyard, breaking the prolonged silence. Ash called out to Siren anxiously as the girl stood frozen in the middle of the empty courtyard after the carriage had left. Serena turned pale and covered her mouth with her hand, breathing heavily in the warm evening light. Ash quickly came closer and tried to understand in confusion why Siren had twisted so suddenly. The girl doubled over with nausea as a cold shiver ran through her weakened body. A frightened Ash abruptly ordered that a doctor be called immediately without taking his eyes off Siren. Serena straightened up with difficulty and hoarsely asked for the noise to stop dreaming only of rest. The bloody blade and the trembling figure of the girl in the white dress flashed again in Siren's memory. Ash looked at Siren silently as her shoulders shook slightly under the weight of the horror she had experienced. Serena quietly apologized, and Ash carefully picked up the weakened girl in his arms. In the bright room, the healer quickly examined Serene, while Ash waited tensely next to the sofa. The doctor reported with surprise that there were no wounds, but Serena sat there pale and completely broken. Ash frowned heavily when he heard about the severe psychological shock after the attack. Serena sat with her eyes closed, while the doctor calmly explained the reasons for her grave condition. The healer left the room, leaving behind a quiet atmosphere and a tired Ash at the door. Serena tried to rise from the sofa, but the healer's hand gently stopped her abrupt movement. Ash came closer and firmly promised to personally escort Siren back to the estate. Before leaving, Ash asked to wait a little, and a warm light slid across the spacious room. Left alone, Siren heavily covered her face with her hand and tried to cope with the overwhelming fatigue. Serena curled up on the sofa, exhausted, as the warm light of the room softly enveloped her figure. Ash was busy sorting through papers at the table, putting aside important details for Dennis and the guards. Looking up from the documents, Ash wanted to call out to Siren, but the room greeted him with complete silence. Moonlight slid across Ash's face, and his stern gaze slowly softened in surprise. Serena fell asleep quietly, right on the sofa, her head resting on her hands after a long and hard day. Ash froze next to the sofa and looked at the sleeping Siren for a long time, with unusual calm. Ash sat down next to the sofa and thoughtfully looked at the tired Siren, who was fast asleep by the armrest. A warm light glided through Siren's hair as Ash quietly covered her with a tired, long look. A few days later, the exam results were announced in the Great Hall, and Siren tensely awaited the verdict. Hearing the assignment to the 5th Division, Siren froze in confusion amid the bright noise of the hall. A murmur of admiration immediately arose around Siren, as such a swift translation rarely happened. Eugene listened calmly to the announcement of the transfer, while the other knights quietly exchanged glances nearby. Siren stood next to the new squad, trying to hide her excitement under a stern and even expression. Eugene called out to Siren cautiously as the sunlight fell softly on the academy's spacious courtyard. The guy was noticeably nervous before the conversation, hiding his embarrassment behind a tense and awkward seriousness. Serena calmly stopped in front of Eugene and patiently waited for the reason for his unexpected conversation. A brief silence fell over the courtyard as Eugene gathered his thoughts before speaking. Eugene bowed sharply before Serena and sincerely apologized for his past behavior. Eugene awkwardly began to talk about the previous fight, while his friends nearby watched the conversation with smiles. Serena calmly admitted her own guilt, and her quiet response greatly embarrassed Eugene. There was another pause in the courtyard, while Eugene prepared to tell the real reason for his apology. Eugene confessed to the rumors about Siren's family, and the faces of the knights nearby suddenly turned pale in shock. Serena touched her lips thoughtfully, listening attentively to Eugene's explanation of the old conversations. Serena thoughtfully recalled the conversations about punishing the family after the loud incident at the exam. Serena's memory flashed back to her brother's noisy story about how the Duke had carried her in his arms across the courtyard. Ash calmly announced the harsh punishment for the 8th Division Knights after the investigation. Serena ran a tired hand through her hair, thinking about people looking for an excuse to be cruel. Eugene apologized to Serena again, his gaze heavily lowered from a feeling of his own guilt. Serena admitted that without the arrest, her result would have been significantly higher and more confident. A violent battle flashed through Siren's mind, where the sword's energy burst forth along with rage and pain. Serena calmly reminded Eugene of his duty, and her even voice made the guy feel confused. Eugene confidently promised to repay Siren, clutching his hand tightly to his chest before answering. Moana loudly complained of pity for Siren, while the tea set clinked in the cozy living room. The girl sharply reminded Siren of the New Year's Eve party, where she risked being left completely alone. In the royal palace, preparations were already underway for a luxurious evening filled with music, light, and dancing by the nobility. Sealed invitations were slowly being distributed among the knights, promising a noisy celebration at the beginning of the year. The knightly order was once again preparing for the night watch, while the snowy courtyard shimmered with a cold blue light. Moana threw up her hands and grumbled loudly because Siren had been given a hard shift at the festival again. Serena calmly sipped tea in a soft chair and easily reminded her friend about the good bonus for the post. Moana laughed as she recalled Siren's old attempts to escape her service through lame excuses. Siren's words sounded confident, and Moana's golden eyes widened in surprise at her friend's answer. Moana called out to Siren softly as the warm light of the room fell softly on the carved sofa. Serena quickly dismissed her worries, smiling at her friend and telling her about her new promotion in the division. Moana sheepishly adjusted the sleeves of her dress, while Serena calmly spoke about the family's rare spending. In the luxurious office, Adrian's uncle gloomily sorted through papers and did not leave the Count's room for weeks. Moana jumped up nervously from the sofa, and Siren lazily sipped her tea under the golden light of the living room. Old diaries and thick ledgers lay on the table, surrounded by the dusty glow of a rich estate. Serena spread her hands in surprise, having never even heard of her father's notes before. Moana's excitement flared, and she began talking cheerfully about hidden treasures, her amber eyes sparkling. Moana was animatedly speculating about secret debts, while the gray-haired Earl carefully leafed through an old diary. Serena smiled softly over her cup of tea and thoughtfully discussed the family's hidden money. Siren's purple eyes darkened with thought, and the porcelain cup trembled in her slender fingers. In the huge library, Serena confidently asked Godwin to show her the books her uncle had read. Godwin hastily reached for the high shelf where heavy ancient volumes stood among the dust. Several worn books fell into the butler's hands as Siren watched his every move carefully. Serena questioned Godwin carefully as the stack of old books lay heavily in his arms. Serena's purple gaze grew colder as her uncle was trying too hard to hide the notes he had read. In the warm library, Siren resolutely opened the books and ordered hot tea to be brought to her. The golden pages rustled under Serena's fingers as the evening light softly illuminated the study. A tired Serena sat writing all night, but the solution stubbornly eluded her. Ash met Siren at the stone wall and frowned in worry when he saw her exhausted appearance. Ash's cold palm rested on Serene's forehead, and her purple eyes flickered in confusion at the proximity. Ash calmly checked the heat, while an embarrassed Siren tried to push his confident hands away. A warm light slid across Ash's face as he leaned too close to a confused Siren. Serena quickly made excuses about lack of sleep, and with a smile turned the conversation to her quiet younger brother. The fair-haired Ezra calmly held the folders to his chest, while Serena spoke of him tenderly. Serena smiled wearily and confessed to Ash that she was secretly looking for money among the Count's diaries. Serena awkwardly admitted to Ash that she was getting deeper and deeper into the Count's old family ledgers. Siren's purple eyes dimmed with tiredness as she quietly made excuses with the heavy reading of the notes. Ash calmly offered to help the scarlet collar of his uniform, blazing brightly in the evening light. Siren looked up sharply, remembering Moana's words about people connected to family books. Moana's dark memories surfaced before Siren, as the cold corridor was drowned in blue shadow. Serena nervously covered her mouth with her hand, scolding herself for this new dangerous thought about the Count's diaries. Ash looked closely at Siren and gently steered the conversation away from the alarming investigation. Siren clutched her temples in alarm and admitted to Ash that the Queen was still in danger. Fatigue lay heavily on Serene's face as the evening light glided softly through her hair. Serena quietly declined the sumptuous dinner, pressing her palm to the trembling collar of her uniform. Ash smiled warmly at Siren and calmly thanked her for accepting her invitation to the evening. At the Hunter estate, the servants looked at each other in shock upon hearing the news of the mistress's fiancé's visit. Serena savored the hot dinner as the soft light shimmered on the silverware. Ezra sat awkwardly next to Ash at the long table, trying to be as quiet as possible. Serena looked at the servants in confusion when the mansion interpreted her invitation strangely. The young maid beamed with delight and warmly supported Siren amid the noisy bustle of the kitchen. Siren covered her face with her hand in embarrassment, realizing that the servants already considered Ash to be her fiancé. Ash quietly thanked them for dinner as the aroma of roasting meat filled the spacious dining room. A male voice suddenly sounded behind Siren, and Ash looked up from the table warily. Ezra asked about the wedding with childish directness, and Siren almost choked on her dinner at the long table. Siren blushed to the tips of her ears and sharply pulled her brother back, while the servants hid their smiles behind their backs. Ash replied calmly, and with a slight grin, enjoying Siren's confusion in the bright lights of the hall. Serena stubbornly picked at her dinner, with her fork hiding her embarrassment behind a cold look and forced calm. Ezra's new question made Siren sit up abruptly, her golden locks shaking with excitement. Ezra cowered under his sister's stern gaze as the roast bird cooled in the middle of the table. At dinner, caustic rumors about an engagement surfaced, and Ash remained unperturbed amid the awkward silence. Ash calmly explained to Ezra that he was not waiting for Siren's title, but for her own decision and feelings. Siren froze under Ash's warm gaze, her lilac eyes flickering at the unexpected confession. Ash admitted with a slight smile that he wanted to leave the choice solely to Siren and not put pressure on her. Siren nervously ran her hand along the bookshelf, trying to hide her embarrassment among the old library tomes. Siren scolded Ash sternly for his words in front of Ezra, while his golden locks trembled with excitement. An argument broke out between the marble columns, and Siren sharply rejected Ash's attempt to smooth things over. Ash sighed heavily, reminding him of the adult Ezra, who had long understood the hidden meaning of adult conversations. Ash calmly explained his words to Siren, and the warm light of the library softened the heaviness of the conversation. Siren looked down thoughtfully, admitting to herself that Ash was indeed behaving with dignity. Siren's thoughts raced around the engagement, the cold glint of the ring flaring uneasily in her memory. Siren nervously touched the books on the shelf, worried that Ezra would become too attached to Ash. Siren abruptly handed Ash the heavy book, trying to hide her confusion behind a stern look. Ash loomed over the table next to Siren, a tense and awkward silence falling between them. A funny squabble broke out in the library, and Siren sheepishly admitted that she didn't understand almost everything. Ash brooded darkly over Earl Hunter as the warm light of the library glided across the high shelves. Serena confidently ran her finger over the old records, sorting through the Hunter family's expenses and income. Ash frowned over the pages of the ledger, and Siren watched his reaction warily. Ash leaned closer to the table and pointed at the strange recording, causing Siren to become alarmed. A huge sum of money emerged from the yellowed pages, and Ash quickly noticed a mistake in the documents. Siren touched her lips, thoughtfully amazed at how easily Ash understood her lands. Ash calmly reminded her of his rank as commander, and Siren looked up with confused lilac eyes. Serena peered intently at the old records, trying to understand the mystery of her father's last days. Ash pointed confidently to the suspicious money transfer, and an uneasy silence fell over the library. Siren felt uneasy at Ash's proximity as the conversation about large expenses grew darker. Ash leaned close and carefully asked Siren about her father's last words. There was no explanation among the dry numbers, and Serena thoughtfully pressed her fingers to her lips. Ash carefully laid out the notes in front of Serena, explaining the difference between taxes and investments. The conversation turned to trade and maritime investments, and new suspicions flared in Serena's mind. Ash calmly explained to Serene the risks of maritime trade, while funny ship diagrams enlivened the conversation. Before Serene's eyes flashed sinking ships and sacks of gold hiding the dangerous game of merchants. Ash confidently linked Earl Hunter's notes to investments and gold coins scattered across the pages. Serene frowned at the strange mark, realizing that the profits had been reinvested into trading. Ash and Siren sat tensely among the tall shelves of the old library, discussing the missing investments. On the old map, Ash showed the route to Drumlerig, explaining the long route taken by trading ships. Siren suddenly covered her lips with her hand, amazed at the difference between the merchant and military ships. Siren's memory flashed to the gloomy throne room, where the king discussed orders for the navy. Ash suddenly became wary after Siren's words, and a heavy silence hung between the bookshelves. Siren's grip on the collar of her dress tightened as Ash carefully connected her guesses with the attack on the queen. Ash slowly leaned towards Siren, their gazes meeting in the warm light of the library. A dangerous tension hung between them, as Ash quietly hinted that Siren wasn't hiding anything from him. Serena finally admitted that she had a better understanding of the family's finances than she wanted to show others. Ash laughed softly and immediately realized that Siren was not at all good at hiding the truth. As Ash studied the open ledger, Siren clasped her hands nervously, feeling increasingly vulnerable around him. Among the chaotic entries, suspicions emerged about private loans that Earl Hunter had been hiding from his family. The realization that her father might have borrowed money from private individuals made Serene turn pale with alarm. Ash carefully asked Siren if she had checked not only the bank debts, but also any possible private loans her father had. At first, Serena was confused because it hadn't even occurred to her that the Count could borrow money from dubious creditors. Ash explained that there are people who lend money at huge interest rates to those who have already been rejected by banks, and such debts can destroy an entire family. Hearing that the interest could reach almost 100, Serena was horrified and involuntarily began to connect the disappearance of the money with the actions of her uncle. Gradually, a terrible thought took shape in her head. Perhaps her father was trying to pay off someone else's debt, which one of the relatives was hiding from the whole family. Ash suggested that if Earl Hunter acted as guarantor for someone else's debt, then he should have kept a copy of the agreement. These words seemed to hit Siren hard. She suddenly realized that her father had really been carefully hiding something before his death. Snippets of conversations and hidden papers came to her mind, making her suspicions about her uncle even stronger. Serena realized that the treaty needed to be found as quickly as possible before someone destroyed or tampered with the evidence. Overwhelmed with worry for her family, she almost gave in to panic, but Ash gently stopped her and tried to calm her down. Just as Siren was about to panic, Ash called out to her sharply, forcing her to collect her thoughts. He confidently stated that Earl Hunter most likely did not take responsibility for his uncle's debt, although he wanted to double-check everything. Serena was surprised by such confidence, since the knightly order did not usually investigate the private financial affairs of aristocrats. However, Ash clearly knew more than he was saying out loud, and his calmness only increased Siren's suspicions. Gradually, the girl began to understand that Ash had been conducting his own investigation into the Hunter family for a long time, and was hiding some of the facts he had discovered. Ash moved the chair closer to the table and calmly sat Siren down while the papers trembled in her hands. Siren froze in her lilac dress as Ash confessed to secretly investigating the Hunter family. Under the cold light of the throne, Ash recalled the king's order and the background check on Earl Hunter. Ash sat down next to Serena and quietly explained that he had found no connection between the Count and the crimes. Siren nervously laced her fingers around her lips, trying to accept the truth about Ash's covert investigation. Pressing her palms to her face, Siren laughed quietly from exhaustion, fear, and a strange relief. Siren leaned across the table towards Ash, anxiously trying to make sure her father was innocent. Ash recalled the order's dark reports. Count Hunter visited dangerous areas, but not criminals. Covering her lips with her hand, Siren, with a trembling breath, thanked fate for her father's honest name. The warm light of the office softened Siren's face as she quietly thanked Ash for his help. Ash calmly clarified that the investigation was his duty to the king and his future marriage. Serena looked away in embarrassment and admitted that checks before a noble wedding had long been commonplace. In the warm office, Siren sincerely thanked Ash for the lessons, training, and family support. Ash listened calmly as Siren confessed her concern for Ezra and his help during the last battle. Siren fiddled with her fingers in embarrassment, remembering how Ash had protected her even after their engagement. Ash reached out to Siren with a confused smile, not understanding the sudden wave of gratitude. In a funny silence, Ash asked seriously about the illness, while Siren awkwardly made excuses. Serena looked down and admitted that Ash had done more for her than a groom required. Mona teased Siren with a sly smile, hinting at Ash's feelings and her confused blush. In the golden light of the office, Siren quietly asked Ash about getting closer, clutching the hem of her full skirt. Ash looked up at Siren with rare seriousness, waiting for her to continue her confused thoughts. Siren looked away shyly and carefully confessed her feelings to Ash, shaking with awkwardness. Under the evening sky, Siren thanked Ash for his help, hiding her confusion behind a calm tone. Ash smiled softly at Siren against the blue tiles of the courtyard, accepting her sincere gratitude without words. Serena hurriedly asked Ash to continue checking the ledger, trying to hide her embarrassed face. Siren quietly thanked Ash under the blue sky of the courtyard, hiding her embarrassment behind a soft smile. Ash held Siren's warm gaze as the evening breeze swayed the shadows among the trees of the estate. Siren sheepishly wished Ash sweet dreams, fiddling with the lace on the collar of her lavender dress. Anna looked at Siren with confusion as she quickly disappeared towards the office. In the semi-dark room, Siren sank to the floor, pressing her palms to her trembling heart. Siren's thoughts returned to Ash's words about intimacy, and the girl's cheeks flushed hotly. Siren covered her lips with her hand in horror, remembering her unexpected question and Ash's confused look. In the morning, Dennis called out to Ash in the yard with a wide smile, cheerfully waving his white glove. In the sunlight, Dennis made a sarcastic comment about Siren as he walked alongside Ash along the path. Ash coldly cut off Dennis's taunts, adjusting his scarlet cloak and hiding his embarrassed look. Dennis kept up with Ash, asking him about his visit to Siren with a sly grin. Ash calmly told Dennis about lunch and the ledger lessons at the Hunter Mansion. A sly Dennis reminded Ash of the king's order, his green eyes flashing and his smile widening. Under Dennis's jokes, Ash silently walked forward, hiding his growing feelings for Siren. Dennis smirked as he teased Ash about Siren as the knights walked through the bright courtyard. Ash frowned and asked Dennis to remain silent, hiding his anxiety under a cold calm. In the silence of the office, Siren recalled Ash's question, sitting among the warm light and old books. Ash played with Siren's reaction for a long time, sensing not fear, but something deeper in her gaze. Under the high window, Ash honestly admitted his feelings for Siren, maintaining a nightly restraint. Siren froze in her chair, her cheeks burning as Ash's words echoed through the room. Ash smiled softly as he saw Siren's relief in the golden light of the spacious office. In the courtyard of the headquarters, the red-haired knight hastily called out to Ash, breathing heavily after running. The messenger bowed nervously before Ash and Dennis, adjusting his glasses with a trembling hand. The messenger anxiously informed Ash of an urgent report as the morning courtyard filled with the noise of headquarters. Ash and Dennis suddenly tensed up after hearing the news about monsters near the kingdom's capital. Dennis ruffled his hair in irritation as he discussed the divisions and the lack of knight reinforcements. In the courtyard of the headquarters, Ash coldly clarified the number of monsters looking directly at the envoy. After the words about 70 monsters, Ash and Dennis exchanged heavy, tense glances. Ash coldly ordered more knights to gather. As sunlight slid across the white cloak, the messenger jumped up and ran down the headquarters corridor to carry out Ash's order without delay. Dennis sighed wearily next to Ash, remembering the past attacks and the growing number of monsters. Under the gray sky, Dennis grimly admitted that what was happening looked too much like someone's plan. Ash looked down thoughtfully, going through disturbing thoughts about the hidden reason for the monster invasion. In the dressing room, Serena twirled thoughtfully in front of the mirror while the maids adjusted her light dress. The girl frowned at the belt, adjusting the fabric at her waist, and looking with annoyance at the narrow sleeves. Serena sighed wearily and asked to leave the dress, since there were almost no reasons left to wear it. Anna threw up her hands and hastily offered to carefully alter the expensive outfit, especially for her. A bright ball flashed before Siren's eyes, where she twirled among the light and rustle of new dresses. Anna excitedly recalled the royal party, where ladies are required to appear in luxurious outfits. The maid flushed with alarm, imagining how her mistress was going to come there in an old dress. Serena calmly asked for at least a day shift for Anna, while she adjusted her long gloves. Serena cheerfully promised the maids a generous salary, and the room immediately filled with joyful noise. Anna collapsed to the floor in confusion, along with the girls, while Serena turned to them in fear. Dennis stopped Ash awkwardly in the hallway, his fingers shaking with excitement as he clutched the papers tighter. Ash nodded briefly to his comrade and calmly suggested that they discuss the disturbing news away from prying eyes. On the empty street, Dennis spoke seriously, and Ash's face quickly became hard and tense. Dennis spoke about the investigation into the attack, which was linked to the secret movements of Earl Hunter. Ash frowned under the cold light, listening carefully to every word about suspicious evidence. A dark alley flashed through Dennis's mind, where the Count's men had hidden among the damp stone and shadows. Dennis let out a heavy sigh, admitting the lack of evidence, and Ash looked down thoughtfully. Siren clenched her palms in dismay, thinking about the crown next to Ash's future commander's name. Ash stopped abruptly in the middle of his conversation, and Dennis looked at his gloomy face in surprise. The thought of the old king hit Dennis harder than the cold, causing him to turn pale in confusion. Dennis flared up in the middle of the street, accusing Earl Hunter of a dangerous thirst for power and crazy plans. Ash silently walked into the shadow of the arch, hiding his heavy thoughts under a cold and detached expression on his face. The dark sky hung over the street as Ash tried to figure out what was true and what was a fatal accident. Ash's memory flashed to a warm garden, where young Siren walked alongside the caring Count Hunter. The Count raised his daughter among flowers and balls, avoiding conversations about calculations, swords, and harsh studies. Ash thought darkly, trying to understand why Siren's talent had remained unused for years. Empty safes, old books, and missing money flashed before my eyes without a single explanation. The heavy gold medallion swung in the air as Ash's thoughts formed a dangerous guess. The commander raised his head sharply and coldly stated the reason for the Hunter family's recklessness. Dennis stood frozen in the middle of the street, shocked as he listened to Ash's conclusion about Siren's future next to the throne. Dennis was tensely going through his guesses, trying to understand why Earl Hunter needed the Queen's death. Ash abruptly stopped his thoughts, and a dangerous and alarming thought flashed in his cold gaze. Dennis paled at the sudden whisper, as the conversation suddenly turned to the heir to the throne. The old king sat on his throne under the heavy light, while the prince's fate was discussed behind his back. The young prince looked confident and calm, not at all resembling a person who would be easy to eliminate. Dennis pondered the benefits of marriage gloomily, as the wind blew uneasily across the empty palace courtyard. Ash slowly raised his head and uttered a terrible guess that took Dennis's breath away. The thought of the throne burned through Ash's mind, and a heavy and frightening suspicion grew inside him. The bright image of the prince appeared before my eyes, linking together the conspiracy, the marriage, and the name of Siren. Ash studied the papers at his desk in silence, as heavy thoughts slowly formed into a dangerous chain. Dennis approached Ash aggressively in the yard, demanding to know where their investigation would lead. Ash coldly cut off the guesswork and focused on the evidence surrounding the Queen's death and the Earl. Dennis asked again in confusion, and the name of Count Hunter sounded in the empty and dark courtyard. A memory of a man in a cloak surfaced in Ash's mind as he recounted the events of the week before the Count's death. Dennis looked tensely at his comrade, and Ash calmly called the incident with the carriage a setup. On the day of the exam, young Ezra rode in the carriage next to her parents, clutching her trembling fingers tightly. The night road ended in a terrible accident, and the broken carriage disappeared into glass and darkness. Dennis tensely recounted the details of the report, while Ash silently pieced together the chain of suspicious events. Dennis's frown deepened, considering the possibility that Earl Hunter himself might have been behind the family's tragedy. Ash looked away gloomily at the papers, fully aware of how dangerous the investigation was becoming. In the palace courtyard, Ash ordered surveillance of Serena, continuing the investigation according to protocol. Ash stared hard at the papers, worried that the investigation would hurt the trusting and stubborn Siren again. Siren adjusted her dark cloak at the palace gates, hiding her anxiety behind a calm and even voice. The huge royal palace greeted the girl with cold towers and echoing silence after a long separation. The stern face of an old man connected with the secrets of the past, and dangerous conversations surfaced in Siren's memory. The girl abruptly looked away towards the garden, trying not to let fear spoil her return to the palace. Serena quietly convinced herself to stay away from the man associated with the family's dark memories. The cheerful courtier waved her hand joyfully, instantly breaking the heavy atmosphere of the cold autumn morning. Siren smiled softly in response, trying to appear calm in the noisy and busy courtyard. Serena raised her eyes to the gray sky, and the maids cheerfully compared her mood to the first snow. The red-haired girl crossed her arms in displeasure, complaining about work instead of the long-awaited winter holiday. Serena laughed quietly, covering her hands, and with unexpected warmth joined the conversation about romance. Dennis watched Siren's bright figure from afar, hiding his smile under a stern, commanding demeanor. The soldiers hurriedly ran to their posts, while Siren walked confidently through the noisy courtyard. Ash called out to the girl amidst the bustle of the guard and looked closely at her calm, pale face. Siren slowly turned to Ash, warily awaiting a new order in the cold palace morning. Ash appeared in the courtyard in a luxurious uniform, with fur and silver, attracting the attention of the knights and servants. Siren looked at the commander with embarrassment, remembering how quickly Ash had become the hero of the capital. Ash calmly approached the girl among the soldiers and gently pointed out the way to the right post at the flag. Ash awkwardly adjusted his hair, then with a cautious smile, suggested that Siren go for a walk in the evening. Siren stood frozen in the middle of the courtyard as Ash's words about the carriage and care dispelled her anxiety. Ash took another step closer about to say something important, and Siren nervously clenched her fingers to her lips. Behind the couple, the soldiers exchanged sly glances, discussing the engagement and the strict palace rules. Serena quietly agreed to the meeting, looking down, and Ash breathed a sigh of relief in the noisy courtyard. Ash saw the girl off with a warm smile and raised his palm as Serena slowly walked towards the posts. Serena walked slowly through the noisy hall of the palace, getting lost among the gold music and festive crowd. The girl looked up at the sparkling chandeliers, recalling distant New Year's Eve evenings during the time of the royal title. Siren's memory flashed to the old king with his cold face, who forbade her to enjoy the festivities and dances. The king sat lazily on his throne with a glass of wine, while young Siren silently lowered her eyes at his feet. Ash met the girl at the door of the hall, and Siren suddenly thought about her last dance. Siren paused amid the light and music, trying to retrieve the memory, eluding her among the voices of the palace. A warm hall flashed before the girl's eyes, where she was whirling in a dance under the attentive gaze of the king. Serena pressed her palm to her chest in confusion, realizing that she didn't remember her mysterious partner's face at all. In a glowing memory, the blurred silhouette of a man slowly approached Siren amidst the golden light of the ball. Siren's memory flashed with the warm palms of a tall man confidently holding her in the midst of a glittering ball. The stranger carefully hugged Siren around the waist, and the golden light softly glided over his dark silhouette. The butler opened the doors of the banquet hall as Serena slowly returned from her old memories. The guests bowed their heads in respect as the Hunter family walked confidently through the palace's luxurious hall. Gale Hunter smiled smugly next to Adriana, enjoying the attention of the courtiers and the glitter of the celebration. Hearing Ash Graywind's name, Gale turned around abruptly, and worry instantly flashed in his eyes. A stern elderly lady watched the title ceremony closely. While the guests bowed respectfully around her, Gale Hunter confidently led Adriana through the hall, reminding his daughter of the importance of the future royal marriage. Adriana smiled coquettishly among the pink patterns and chandeliers, enjoying the attention of the wealthy guests. The girl hurried to the nobility before the others, wanting to be the first to collect the admiring glances of noble society. Serena stood to the side amidst the golden glow of the palace, hiding her fatigue beneath a cold, calm face. Adriana cast a haughty glance at Siren, remembering with irritation the past humiliations and rivalries. The red-haired Duchess of Greywind turned from the drinks tables, hearing a familiar voice over the music of the ball. The stern lady approached the girl with impeccable posture, carefully studying the noisy royal hall. The lady bowed respectfully to the lady, while the conversation about the queen's health increased the anxiety of the guests. Ash stood by the columns of the banquet hall, watching the guests, while the noise of the celebration hid his anxious thoughts. Nearby, Dennis was complaining irritably about Duchess Greywind's endless lectures on knightly discipline. Ash calmly adjusted his gloves, while Dennis was confusedly trying to separate duty rest and court rules. Hearing the announcement of the king's arrival, the knights instantly stood up straight, amid the bright gold and music of the palace. The old king walked slowly down the stairs, next to the queen, surrounded by heavy luxury and silence. The guests fell respectfully silent as the king greeted those gathered for the winter banquet with a cold smile. The queen appeared before the nobles pale and tired, causing anxious whispers among the ladies of the court. Ash watched the queen closely, realizing that her weakness could no longer be hidden, even at the celebration. Ash watched Siren closely among the guests, noticing her uneasy silence in the midst of the noisy celebration. Serena froze by the column of the banquet hall, pressing her palm tightly to her chest amidst the conversations of others. The girl looked down, trying to hide her trembling as the music and bright lights grew heavier. Old events involving the queen, fear, and an almost forgotten past flashed through Siren's memory. Serena walked slowly across the marble floor, trying to calm her breathing amid the golden glow of the palace. Disturbing thoughts about the past year again washed over the girl, increasing her inner tension and confusion. Ash quickly walked up to Sirene through the crowd of guests and leaned down worriedly, catching her trembling gaze. Ash leaned anxiously towards Siren in the noisy hall, noticing her trembling and pale face. Siren suddenly pressed herself against Ash's chest, clutching the fabric of his uniform with trembling cold fingers. Ash carefully held the girl by the shoulders, confusedly trying to understand the reason for her sudden fear. In the middle of the luxurious hall, Ash hugged Siren tightly, hiding her trembling from the gaze of the court guests. Siren's gaze fell again on the king sitting on the golden throne next to the silent queen. In the noise of the banquet, the girl noticed courtiers with glasses of wine, and the anxiety inside her grew stronger. Ash looked down at Siren as she struggled to contain her overwhelming anxiety. Siren trembled in Ash's arms as he helplessly stroked her back in the bright light of the palace. Siren rested her forehead on Ash's shoulder, breathing heavily amid the golden glow of the bustling royal hall. Ash's warmth stirred Siren's old memories of dancing with a tall man in a luxurious palace. Siren looked up at Ash sharply, her violet eyes flashing with worry and confusion. Ash looked down at Siren calmly as she tried to steady her trembling breathing and thoughts. Siren quickly pulled away from Ash, pressing her hand to her chest in embarrassment under the golden light of the chandeliers. Ash gently asked Siren to tell the truth, and the girl lowered her gaze, hiding her growing confusion. Siren stood before Ash quiet and guilty, fiddling with the collar of her dark dress with trembling fingers. Ash smiled warmly at Siren and gently hugged her, trying to calm her anxiety amid the noise of the banquet. To the sound of chandeliers, the guests discussed the engagement of Duke Greywind, looking at the luxurious cake in the center of the hall. Siren shone among the lilac flowers, with a thin sword in her hands, reminiscent of the legend of ancient knights. The lady with golden eyes watched Serena coldly discussing love-blood and advantageous marriages of the nobility. The scarlet wine trembled in the glass as sweet gossip about feelings and engagements spread throughout the hall. Adriana clenched her fists under the golden light of the palace, jealously comparing herself to the gentle and calm Serena. Adriana's eyes flashed with the luxurious dresses, jewelry, and wealth of the Hunter family, igniting envy. Adriana's silk skirts fluttered uneasily as she thought furiously about power and the happiness of others. Ash stood in the soft glow of the hall, calm and impeccable, attracting the glances of the ladies of the court. Adriana rose abruptly from her chair, her golden eyes flashing with greed as she looked at Ash. Ash watched Siren thoughtfully as the golden lights of the palace shimmered softly on the fur of his robe. Siren quickly disappeared behind the high doors of the palace, leaving Ash in the middle of the noisy festive hall. Ash tiredly ran his hand through his hair and remembered Dennis's caustic words about love with a slight smile. Ash looked up at the approaching Adriana, her burgundy dress sparkling brightly among the palace candles. Adriana greeted Ash with a sweet smile, gracefully bowing her head under the admiring glances of the banquet guests. Adriana spoke enthusiastically about Siren's engagement, hiding her jealousy behind a soft and gentle tone. Ash looked down at Adriana as she chose her words carefully amid the noise of the room. A memory of the engagement conversation, full of anxiety and hidden tension, flashed before Adriana's eyes. Ash looked coldly at Adriana, his whole appearance showing his reluctance to continue the difficult conversation among the guests. Adriana timidly pressed her palm to her chest and spoke to Ash more softly, hiding her jealousy behind politeness. Adriana's slender fingers slid down Ash's sleeve, and the man frowned at her too close touch. Adriana looked up with a golden gaze and smiled smugly, enjoying Ash's embarrassment and attention. Ash looked away sharply as Adriana continued to walk beside him through the glittering banquet hall. Adriana laughed tenderly and touched Ash again, hiding her harsh thoughts behind the sweet smile of an aristocrat. Ash's black glove slowly wavered in the air as the man patiently held back his growing irritation. Ash abruptly removed his hand from Adriana, and the girl froze in surprise amidst the golden light and music of the palace. Ash smiled coldly at Adriana, amidst the golden glitter of the palace, no longer hiding the irritation in his voice and eyes. Adriana stood in front of Ash, confused her fingers, trembling as she gripped the hem of her luxurious burgundy dress tighter. Adriana's golden eyes flickered with alarm as the usually gentle Ash seemed like a stranger and a dangerous person to her. Ash had looked calm and warm next to Siren, but now a heavy, oppressive aura hung around the man. Ash stepped closer to Adriana, and the shadow of his tall figure fell sharply on the light marble floor. Ash reminded Adriana of Siren's status, with icy calm emphasizing his respect for the girl in front of everyone. Ash leaned over to the pale Adriana and quietly warned her not to cross the line with Siren. After a difficult conversation, Ash silently turned and walked away through the noisy, shining hall of the royal palace. Adriana stood amidst the noisy banquet with a fiery gaze, holding back her jealousy and resentment after Ash's words. Adriana's golden eyes flashed with anger as she mentally blamed Siren for her humiliation. Serena walked slowly through the bright hall of the palace, her legs moving heavily after a long and tiring shift. Serena ran her hand tiredly through her hair, trying to cope with the headache and trembling in her body. In the shining corridor, Lauren quickly approached Siren, noticing her exhausted and pale appearance. Lauren spoke cheerfully to Serena, and the girl only smiled weakly under the golden light of the palace. Lauren held Siren's hand tightly, taking the girl away from the noisy and stuffy recreation area. Lauren confidently introduced Siren to the older lady, while the girl sheepishly adjusted the collar of her dark dress. Serena froze in front of the gray-haired countess, looking with confusion into her calm and stern face. Countess Ashley Assis smiled softly at Serene, amid the warm candlelight and luxurious golden interior. The countess's calm voice hid a heavy aura of the past, and Serena anxiously clasped her fingers to her chest. Serena bowed awkwardly to the countess, trying to look collected next to the attentive and serious Lauren. Countess Assis laughed softly, and the tense Serene looked up in confusion amidst the soft glow of the hall. Serena looked down awkwardly, while next to Countess Assis, she anxiously recalled old hurtful rumors. The countess spoke warmly of Siren, and the girl shyly clasped her hands in the soft light of the living room. Lauren hurried to get drinks for Serene, leaving the girl next to the good-natured gray-haired countess. Countess Assis shivered from the cold, wrapping herself in a dark green dress, amid the noisy palace revelry. Serena quickly took off her uniform jacket and carefully threw it over the shoulders of the surprised Countess Assis. The countess smiled softly at Siren, and the girl laughed relaxedly next to her. For the first time that evening, the countess's memory flashed back to the difficult years of the palace, filled with cold ridicule and endless loneliness. Serena looked at the countess with quiet sadness, while the woman responded with an unexpectedly warm smile. Countess Assis innocently mentioned Siren's engagement to Duke Ash Grieving, causing the girl to freeze in embarrassment. Siren listened in confusion as the countess praised Ash for his loyalty and long-standing love for her. A memory of a young Ash appeared among blue roses, a quiet boy who always had his eyes only on Siren. The countess smiled as she recounted old rumors about how Ash was supposedly jealous and eliminated all of Siren's rivals. Siren realized with horror that such crazy rumors about Ash had indeed been circulating around the palace. Meanwhile, one of the knights teased his comrade, reminding him of the upcoming test for Siren. The knight awkwardly recalled the legendary hero who had once been expelled from the order for the sake of Siren. Serena looked down and quietly smiled as she wondered if she really should forgive past grievances. Lauren brought drinks to the lounge area, hot tea for Countess Assis and juice for Serena. During the conversation, Lauren accidentally mentioned that on the way she met a commander who was looking for Siren and was surprised by her absence. Serena immediately tried to leave, but the countess gently stopped her, noticing that the girl was too pale and could clearly barely stand on her feet. Assis praised Ash's behavior with a slight smile, calling his actions the quality of a true knight. Serena thanked the countess for the loan of clothes and got ready to leave, trying to remain calm. The countess watched her go and wondered why Dennis had suddenly started to care so openly about Serene personally. A suspicion flashed through Assis's mind that Dennis had previously only discussed Serena through rumors and jokes, and now he was suddenly confronted with her directly. Serena said goodbye politely and left the restroom, still feeling tired and uneasy inside. During the break, Ash himself found Serene and asked her to give him some time. He explained that he wanted to visit her in the ladies' room, but he didn't dare go inside, so he waited for her outside. They went out onto the balcony of the palace, where the first snow had just begun to fall. Serena watched the falling snowflakes in fascination. Ash calmly noted that this was the first snow of the year, and that time was flying by too quickly. The atmosphere became very quiet and warm as they simply stood side by side watching the snowfall. Serena thought about how, after returning to the past and living again, she was reliving moments of her youth. A realization flashed through her mind. After a second chance, life seemed to have returned to the moment when she was 19 years old. Serena thought about her past life, before she lived without noticing the passage of time and without thinking about the future. Now she was amazed that she was once again experiencing the first snow with Ash, an event that she could not even imagine in her past life. The atmosphere between them became especially quiet and private, so Siren sheepishly asked why Ash had called her separately. Ash honestly admitted that he was worried about what happened at the party and wanted to make sure she was okay. Serena was taken aback by such direct concern and didn't immediately find an answer. For the first time in a long time, she felt calm and warm next to Ash, despite all the worries of the evening. Siren admitted that she had indeed not been in the best condition at the festival and thanked Ash for his concern. Ash carefully asked if she wanted to tell him why she had been acting so strange. Serena became embarrassed and tried to avoid answering, but Ash gently insisted he was ready to wait until she decided to tell the truth herself. These words deeply hurt Siren because in his past life, Ash had already said almost the same thing to her. She remembered that before, he had always respected her choice and never tried to pressure her by force. A moment came to mind where Ash said he wanted the decision to always be Siren's. Realizing this, Siren felt an even stronger difference between Ash and the people who had tried to control her in the past. A very quiet and trusting moment passed between them, Ash making it clear that he was willing to wait as long as it took.